Return to the past with a warehouse. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226, The Small Matter of Settlement. Yaoniang listened to the gift list being read out outside and felt very relieved. Yu has made such a big fuss for his disciple. It's good for Fuzaogi to have him as his master, and it's great for our family to have such an in-law. The old stewards who had been with him for a lifetime echoed. Yes, they brought them in by the carts. They are no worse than the aunts and young ladies. A bunch of noble ladies also gathered at Madame Yu's place to discuss this matter. Could it be that your family is afraid of looking shabby and specially lent them the gifts? I don't think so. The gifts are good, but they are not from Yu Yaoniang craftsmen, who in a family like us would use things made in Beijing. Not only Beijing craftsmen, I heard that the lasok is from Jin craftsmen. Our family would not like it, and I haven't heard that your family would like it either. Can it be that it can only be brought by the groom's family? Not only that, look at those jewelry. The gems are so big, and they are so rigidly chiseled. A bucket of them is blinding, but after a closer look, they are all from the same workshop. There is no difference at all. The big golden wings are heavy, but just look at the gold threads. 1 strand is worth 10 of ours. Where did the low-class craftsman come from and wasted such a large piece of pure gold? Madame Yu wanted to explain at first, but then she figured it out. It was just sour words. These people thought her daughter married a poor man and came to watch the ceremony to see the joke, but they didn't expect to see the joke, but saw the jewels and gems and felt jealous. So they talked about their own things, and Madame Yu dealt with it with a smile. After finally carrying all the real objects, they carried some silver bills next. These silver bills were all paid by Li Ju himself, and he said that he would return them to the young couple in the form of dowry. Fuji Ui wanted to write an IOU, but Li Ju confiscated it. Debts before marriage should be shared after marriage. If he really collected the money, he would have to let the fourth girl pay off the debt together, which would make it seem that his desire to marry her was mixed with too many other interests. Fuji Ui, who was half an apprentice, had plenty of free work to do anyway, so there was no need for him to embarrass him this time. How could Fu Shushan really think that Li Ju had prepared so many expensive gifts for him? He was overwhelmed with emotions for a moment, but with such a big gift in front of him, he couldn't spare the time to express his feelings to Li Ju. The day was bustling all night, and everyone in the city knew that the granddaughter of Mr. Yu Leo was married to the apprentice of Mr. Li Yuan of Kingshan. They all laughed and said that the Yu family was afraid that the good son-in-law would be snatched away by others, so they kept it secret and refused to say it. Today, they couldn't hide it anymore, so they let outsiders know, but they didn't want to show off. And those who knew that Fu Shushan actually came from a poor family only envied his luck for being favored by the Yu and Li families. At night, Fuji Ui felt uneasy and came to Li Ju to discuss it. Li Ju was busy packing his luggage. His return date had been delayed again and again due to various accidents. He was eager to go home and had decided to leave early tomorrow morning. Yu Yaoniang and Xiaolan were also helping, but they couldn't really help much. Li Ju's storage and organization skills were unmatched, and he had the habit of putting things where they were taken. His personal belongings were always placed meticulously, and he didn't need help from others. After Fu Shushan came, he suddenly realized, Master, although we have invited a big gift today, the wedding day is still next month. Can I go to Kingshan County with you? Li Ju remembered that marrying a wife is not just a matter of having a big gift. There are still some things to discuss about where he and his wife's family will live in the future. They can't live in his father-in-law's house. Of course, if Fu Shushan is willing to marry into the family, that's another matter. Li Ju thought for a moment and asked, what do your parents say? Today's wedding gift is actually a temporary measure. According to the rules, it is the parents' orders and the matchmaker's words. It is wrong to make a decision here without informing your parents. You have not completed your studies yet, but you have gone to Kingshan to start a family before me, which is even more wrong. What do you think? Mr. Fu said, my parents' opinions are not worthy of trust. I will have to live my life in the future by myself. It is already a great honor for me to ensure that my parents have enough food and clothing, so I dare not think about other things for the time being. My master treats me well, and he is a good person, but I cannot take his kindness for granted. I originally wanted to take the county school entrance examination to get the support of the students on government stipends. Now that support is no longer a problem. I just want to study with you for a few years. I have heard about your deeds in Kingshan a long time ago, but I only regret that I'm not talented and have little knowledge, and my family has no extra money. I must first survive before I can do anything else, so I cannot follow my classmates to study with you. Today, you are kind to me, allowing me to become your disciple, get married, and become rich and noble. If I cannot serve you, I will first fail the kindness of heaven and fail my original aspirations. As for starting a family, I should discuss it with Master Taishan and his wife. How can I be independent? Li Ju heard that his family situation might be a bit complicated. Out of respect for other people's ideas, he did not ask further questions and only said, in this case, I will arrange a place for you in my family first. How I live, you and your wife should live the same way in my place, without preferential treatment or indulgence. You will set off with me to Lee Garden in Kingshan County tomorrow. The first thing is to settle yourself and prepare the apartment for your married life. The second thing is to explain it clearly to your parents. No matter what the situation is in your family, marriage is a big matter, of course. You must tell your parents everything. After doing these two things, return to Jinling to get married and discuss settlement with the 3 elders and adults of the Yu family. If the elders require their daughter to stay in Jinling, you can choose a house to rent first, and then discuss other things later. Li Ju made it clear that Fu Shushan had a place to stay. The whole requirement was relaxed, and there was only a hidden requirement that Fu Shushan needed to be around to do things. Fu Shushan was very happy. It was true that Li Ju accepted him as a disciple, and he did give him such a large fortune as a facade, but this was for the sake of the Yu family, not for his own sake. If Li Ju does not have a deeper plan, how he will deal with himself in the future will become a big problem. What Li Ju said now, since it is arranged for him, it means that his future is at least covered by Li Yuan. To describe it in more concise modern language, it is equivalent to a high school student who has a job before graduating from college and entering university, so he does not have to consider the problem of unemployment after graduating from university. How can Fu Shushan not be happy? Even if he is not short of money for the time being, the money has been sent to the Yu family. When it comes back, it must be calculated according to the dowry of the 4th girl. If he cannot support himself, but relies on his wife to support him, wouldn't he become a gigolo? Although gigolo is delicious, it is not the meal he wants to eat. So the next morning, the Yu family set out to prepare meals before dawn. Li Ju, Yu Fu, Huang Zhi and others were stuffed with 6 food boxes before leaving. The second master of the Yu family sent them to the Sanli pavilion outside the city gate on behalf of the whole family and stopped reluctantly. 2 days before the return trip, Li Ju did not ride a horse, but sat in a small carriage like a cripple. The mute sat outside the carriage and drove the carriage carefully, fearing that the docile little gelding would not walk smoothly and disturb Li Ju. Fu Shushan thought of the illusion of the master has something to do, and the disciples do the work, and asked Yaoniang, Zio Lun, and others about Li Ju's habits. He learned that he was a person who could not hold back. It was rare for him to stay in the carriage like this. He was worried that Li Ju had something to do, so he took Li Ju's usual breakfast from Yaoniang and sent it over. Chapter 227 Xiaolian's doubts. Li Ju was slumped in the carriage at this time, his mind full of thoughts like socializing is more tiring than fighting in the battlefield. I should find someone to socialize for me when I have time. Is it that the Simmons mattress at home is not comfortable to sleep on? Or is it that cats and dogs are not easy to pet? Or is it that Sanjiu is not pretty and Kai and Hang is not nice to listen to? Why should I run to Jinling City to suffer this? Fu Shushan happened to interrupt his soul reflection at this time. Teacher, my sister Yaoniang sent me to bring you some snacks. Li Ju waved his hands weakly in the air. No, you and Ada Yaoniang can share it. If I want to eat, I will get it myself. I'm not disabled yet, so you don't need to worry about serving me. Yaoniang, who came to listen to the situation, even raised her voice and lost her breath when she heard it. She was very different from the past. She knew that he was lazy after being busy. If he was left alone, he could be lazy for 7 or 8 days, and in the end he would blame himself for wasting time. Yaoniang then pulled Fu Shushing and forced himself into the carriage to chat with Li Ju. Li Ju had no choice but to get up and sit up straight, sipping tea while listening to his mother talking to his new disciple. What did the master read along the way? He wrote such a thick notebook. Nothing, just the people's livelihood, customs, and habits. Although Jinling and her home both have the same climate, where the sea and land meet in the south of the Yangtze River, there are some slight differences. But the water and land transportation are developed, the land is fertile, and the water and heat are abundant, which is good. This allows everyone to live a decent life, but it's a bit hard. I think in a few years, it will be much better. Yaoniang's face was full of admiration. Of course, more and more people can read and write. And the people the master teaches are all good people like him. Last year, there were many free chicken feather houses. If I, Sister Zhao, had left home and wandered this year, we should be able to easily find a chicken feather house to spend the winter. Just for this reason, I don't know how many more people can be saved in a year, not to mention the poor relief department. Master, this is all your credit. The master has accepted an apprentice now, so Brother Fu will do the same in the future. Fu Shushan was named, and he hesitated for a few words. Yaoniang asked again, does Brother Fu live in the garden like us? No, I plan to rent a small house with 2 entrances next to it for your Brother Fu. The 2 sides will be connected, so you can come to Lee Garden to eat and play. At night, just close the gates on both sides, and go your own way. If he is alone in Kingshan City, the small house with 2 entrances will definitely be enough. If his wife is not used to it, we can expand it a little bit. Alas, your Brother Fu is very young, he already has a wife and a master, and when I send you all out one day, I will be the only old man left in the whole garden. Fu Shushan's face turned red with embarrassment. Yaoniang was also a little embarrassed and angry when she heard about the marriage, and rubbed her hands repeatedly. Master, you old men are so bad. How can you joke about this? I'm angry. Li Ju finally regained some spirit. Okay, I won't talk about you anymore. It's good to go out and walk around. It's good to broaden your horizons, reading thousands of books, and traveling thousands of miles. If I didn't come out for this trip, I would never be able to personally experience the real living conditions of Jinling weavers, nor would I understand the operating rules of the temple. It's always good to have these experiences, at least the next thing won't go off track. Fu Shushan himself was actually born in a weaver family. Because his parents needed money, he became a weaver, which almost caused him to lose the qualification for the imperial examination. Due to some other family reasons, he now became a disciple and got engaged without telling his family a word. Hearing Li Ju talking about weavers, Fu Shushan felt a little scared, fearing that Li Ju would regret accepting this disciple because his parents were lowly craftsmen. He couldn't help asking, teacher, are you interested in the weavers in Jinling? Li Ju said, of course. There are dozens of weavers in Lian. After this year, 20 to 30 mule looms will be popularized. By then, the number of weavers in Kingshan County will reach 200. Some things must be planned early. Jinling's brocade industry is well known far and wide, and there must be many weavers. I'll come and see. If you are interested in this, you can do more things in this regard. It just so happens that I need someone who is familiar with the business to help me adjust my thinking at any time, so as to avoid doing things on paper. Fu Shushan hesitated for a moment. Li Ju didn't know this apprentice very well, and didn't know his specific situation. Seeing his hesitation, he knew there must be a reason, and changed his words and said, or if you want to continue to learn about farming and tenancy relationships, that's fine. We had a great conversation last time. You have this talent, and it won't be a loss, wherever you use it. Fu Shushan said, I want to try it. Since I'm a disciple, how can I only learn what I like? I will learn whatever the master teaches. Whether I have learned well or not, whether I need to change or not, I will listen to the master. Li Ju couldn't help laughing. This is my first time as a master, and this is your first time as a disciple. We will move forward together for decades to come, so we should communicate more about everything. The mood of the three of them improved, and Yu Yaoniang didn't have any other ideas. There were two grown men in the car, and there was a mutada outside. It was always awkward for Yu Yaoniang to stay alone with them, so she said goodbye and went back to her car. After getting in the car, Yu Yaoniang saw Xiaolian staring blankly outside. Yu Yaoniang smiled and said, "I'm really destined to be a hard-working person." The master was uncomfortable because he hated red tape and wasted his time. I comforted the master for a long time and came back to see you sighing here. Why are you uncomfortable? Xiaolian and Yu Yaoniang were about the same age, and Yu Yaoniang was closest to Sanjiu, so the two had a deep relationship and always talked about everything. Xiaolian turned slightly and asked, "Master hates distinctions between high and low status, doesn't he?" Yu Yaoniang said, "Of course. If he wasn't afraid of offending the county magistrate, he would have to sit on the same chair with peddlers and hawkers, to drink tea among the guests who came to visit." Xiaolian said, "Then why?" "Because old Master Yu wants to see if I'm suitable for his grandson, so I have to come and see him." My mother was afraid that I would be unhappy in the Yu family, so she didn't ask his family to come and see my mother. And it's the same with that scholar Fu. Why does the master have to take him in as his apprentice, just because he's engaged to the fourth daughter of the Yu family? It's because Scholar Fu comes from a poor family, and there's a world of difference between him and the daughter of the Yu family, so the master needs to give Scholar Fu a face, so that the marriage won't be too ugly. With the master's personality, would he really agree to something like this? The master loves me like a daughter. How could the master agree without any hesitation when Scholar Fu heard that the master met him in the temple and became friends? Yu Yaoniang had no answer to this question. The adults didn't tell them directly why they were taking Xiaolian to Jinling, but they could guess it themselves. Not to mention Xiaolian, even Yu Yaoniang found it a little strange. If they hadn't taken classes from Li Ju for a few years, they probably wouldn't have thought so much. But after all, what Li Ju taught them over the years has subtly influenced their thinking, so they had to ask this question. Yu Yaoniang was confused for a while. After a while, the carriage stopped, and they were going to have a meal and set up the pot to cook. Yu Yaoniang smiled and said, "Didn't the master say that he is only one person with one brain and one heart, and it is impossible for him to be thoughtful of everything? If there is anything that confuses us, just ask him. This way we can avoid trouble due to misunderstandings. The problem you mentioned cannot be figured out by the two of us thinking about it for a whole day, so it is better to wait until the master is free and ask him directly. I think the master will definitely go shopping for vegetables and cook by himself. It's a good opportunity for you to go and ask him." Chapter 228 Li Ju's answer. During the trip, the team had 2 meals a day, one at the start and one at the stopover. If they were hungry in between, they would use dry food. The team brought a lot of food, but if they wanted to eat some fresh vegetables, fruits and meat, they could only buy them from hotels and vendors in small towns, or ask farmers to borrow a place to buy vegetables and cook for themselves. The meals for dozens of people in the team were cooked very quickly by borrowing a large pot from a wealthy family. Li Ju usually arranged for people to buy vegetables and chickens nearby. He personally cooked, and Yu Yaoniang and Xiaolian helped him. Now Li Ju's cooking has been completely surpassed by Shibalang, but he is willing to use oil and meat, and it is still better than others. Therefore, Li Ju took the power of the kitchen on the way back. The same was true for the stopover today. They passed by this place last time they came to Jinling. On the way back today, everyone still rented the same courtyard where they lived last time. Li Ju arranged the carriage and luggage, took some things to exchange for food, and prepared to go to a few families to exchange vegetables and water. Xiaolian jumped out and followed, saying, "Master, I want to go too. I have something to ask you." Xiaolian wanted to follow, which made Fu Shushan a little embarrassed. Li Ju asked Fu Shushan to go to Yu Fu and Huang Zhi to help see if there was anything he could do, and asked Xiaolian to go with him. Just now on the road, he saw a family with a large vegetable garden, which was neat and tidy. Li Ju wanted to go straight to that family to exchange for 20 pounds of fresh vegetables. After ordering vegetables, he could go to the butcher's house that he saw when he stayed here last time to buy meat. And by the way, he could also kill the 2 fat chickens that he saw last time, but didn't eat at his house. Because he brought Xiaolian with him, Li Ju walked very slowly, so that he could observe the situation of the village while walking. Compared with what he saw last time, it seemed to be better. Li Ju lived here at that time, and helped to fix some people's walls, pig pens and vegetable gardens, and also kept some other things. It has been almost half a month since today, and a little difference can be seen. The most typical example is that almost all looms use flying shuttles, which leads to more spinning. Occasionally, you can see carts of cotton and hemp stalks being transported on the road. Next year, more families will definitely want to grow cotton. After walking halfway slowly, Xiaolian was still counting her fingers. Li Ju couldn't help but find it a little funny, so he simply stopped under a big tree and asked, "There will be more people ahead, and it will be inconvenient to talk. What do you want to ask? Ask quickly." Xiaolian stopped and gently stood on tiptoe, then put it down, then stood on tiptoe again, which was a manifestation of her nervousness. Li Ju didn't rush her, just folded his hands and looked at her. Xiaolian hesitated for a long time, and finally changed to a gentle way to ask, "Master, why did you agree to let them see me? I don't necessarily have to be from their family." Li Ju replied, "No wonder you hesitated for so long. It turns out it's because of this matter. First, the person who agreed was not me, but your mother. If I were in power, I would not agree. Second, old Master Yu is old, and to put it bluntly, he may not be able to wait until you are 20 years old. This trip is actually mainly to let him see you in the future, if, just in case, I mean, on the premise that you are willing, you become the granddaughter-in-law of Mr. Yu. He will also know what kind of girl you marry. I think this is an old man's wish, and there is nothing wrong with it. If your mother agrees, I'm afraid there is nothing wrong with it. Third, although I don't think that you and Yusun are marrying up, and I don't think that Yusun is any different from ordinary people, or from you, but the reality is like this. Outsiders think that we are marrying up. The world is like this. Unless we change this world, we can only compromise temporarily. Then, Master, did you accept Fu Shushan as a half apprentice in order to compromise with the world? That's not the case. Even if I didn't accept him as an apprentice, he could still become the son-in-law of the Yu family. I accepted him as an apprentice not for him, but for the girl of the Yu family. When you grow up, your mother will tell you why. But, I do have some selfish motives. I need a helper who has the same philosophy and vision as me. Fu Xiaogi is a good choice. Li Ju explained it to the little girl seriously, and finally asked, "Do you have any more questions?" Xiaolian shook her head, but still stepped forward and grabbed Li Ju's clothes and continued to walk with him. Li Ju first went to the family in the vegetable garden and bought 20 kilograms of various vegetables from them. This family didn't have enough, so he moved some dried bamboo shoots and mushrooms from the next door to make up the number. In the time it took to go back and forth to prepare the dishes, Li Ju had already figured out the important aspects of the family's population, economic income, and daily life. A farmer with a little surplus wealth is vividly depicted on paper. No illness or disaster for many years. Many young men in the family, parents who are alive and well, and all the people are hardworking. These prerequisites are really difficult for ordinary people to meet. No wonder there are always more poor people and fewer rich people. Even for such a family with surplus wealth, it is far from being comfortable. Everyone has to get up early and stay up late to do various jobs to maintain a slight surplus throughout the year. The situation of the butcher Zhang family opposite is the same. He has more ancestral skills than the family in the vegetable garden, such as pig slaughtering and butchering. With skills, it is easy to find a job in peacetime. He is also lucky to be born with big arms and waist, and he can shake the meat on the chopping board with a slap. With such strength, no scoundrel dares to spy on his house. If he marries a diligent daughter-in-law and has a worry-free Yu family, life will certainly be much better. Li Ju bought 10 katas of pork belly and a plate of offal from him, and gave him some extra money, which was considered as buying all the pork bones and coarse salt, and asked him to help cook soup for the elderly and children in the village. Li Ju paid, and Zhang the butcher worked hard, and he was very happy. The farmer's money and production and living materials were very precious, but the farmer's time and energy were not worth anything at all. If you want to take away a grain of rice or a penny from them, they will fight to the death. But if you just ask them to help, things will be simple. Butcher Zhang slapped the chopping board, and several bones were chopped into a small pile in a few seconds. Okay, I thank you on behalf of the villagers, young and old. Here, just like last time, each bone will be boiled 3 times, and I will give the mincemeat on the bones to the old uncles and aunts. Hey, kind-hearted man, what do you want? If it were Li Ju who had just come here 3 years ago, he might say that he wanted to dream of a paradise, but now Li Ju could only smile and say, I want to be happy and do good deeds for my family. The bought vegetables were delivered to the place where they stayed. The staple food was already cooked, and the condiments brought with them had been cut and prepared by Yu Yaoniang and placed on the table. Li Ju started working, heating the pan and adding cold oil to stir fry the spices. He first cooked a pot of pork, beans and eggplant, and then stewed 2 pots of chicken soup with 2 chickens. The other vegetables were stir fried with the remaining oil from roasting meat and stir frying chicken. Li Ju's cooking was not very delicate, but it was delicious with plenty of oil, salt and spices. Even those small vegetables, soaked up with gravy and meat oil, were very fragrant. Even Huang Zhi, who was very health conscious, ate 2 bowls of chicken soup and put down his bowl and chopsticks only when he could not eat anymore. Hey, it's still better to eat with you. Old you, why are you looking at me like that? Haven't you seen anyone add more rice or dishes? Your wife and my wife also praised me like that. Are you going to see your wife? Hey, when we return to Qingshan County, I will still eat and drink with him every day. You have to continue to eat in the cafeteria in the school. Don't envy me. Huang Zhi did not forget to make fun of Yufu, who obviously wanted to add a bowl, but did not add one because of face. Then he picked out a shiny white porcelain bowl, scooped a bowl of skimmed chicken soup, and slowly stirred it with a small pick to let it cool down quickly. This bowl was for Zhu. Zhu was slow to eat, and she had only eaten half of it. Yufu seemed to have been provoked by something, and he also clumsily picked lean meat for Madame Yu. His wife was raised in luxury, unlike other people who like to eat fatty food. His wife looked at the small piece of greasy meat, then looked at Yufu, her eyes full of questions. Fu Shusheng squatted in the corner, thinking about something. His face was red, and his eyes were a little empty. Li Ju felt a little bit of a heart attack. Hey, these couples, they just bully him, a single dog, who has no human rights. Chapter 229. This is the way the world is. The return journey was peaceful. Occasionally, we encountered some scoundrels who would avoid the convoy as soon as they saw the number of people from afar. There were also villagers with fierce folk customs. If they met a weak passerby, they would take action to peel off a layer of skin, but when they met such a convoy, they had to give up all bad thoughts and be a host at ease. Li Ju made a special visit to every family he had stayed with before, so that if there were any problems, they could be solved easily. People in those villages remembered Li Ju's kindness, and when Li Ju visited again, a large group of people would often gather together to see him. Things seemed to be moving in a good direction. The son of an old man who lived alone at home and had almost no ability to work returned home and decided not to go to the city to work, but to stay and support his old father. Although the income would drop sharply, at least the old father could live out his life in peace. The old couple who lost their children adopted a little girl. Although life was hard and the 3 of them were miserable people, it was also a way of life for miserable people to rely on each other. Li Ju did not dare to leave them money, as people without labor at home could not keep any money, but Li Ju left them a recipe for burning honeycomb coal. The weather was getting colder, and it was time to burn coal. Honeycomb coal could be made with just some broken coal slag and soil, so there was no need to worry, even if the recipe was leaked. Every family needed coal, and as long as someone could make it, someone would naturally buy it. There was a disabled retired soldier living in a broken house. When Li Ju passed by again, he had been cleaned up and said he wanted to find a job in the town. He had been a soldier all his life and could not do any farm work. Now he was lame and could not do any farm work. In fact, there was no choice for the temporary workers in the town, but he had this intention. Li Ju felt that there was still hope, so he left him the news of Li Yuan. If there was really no livelihood, Li Yuan could still help. Li Ju picked and chose, leaving a way out for all those who still held hope for life. He could not save the people in the world, but he could always save the people in front of him, just as he saved Yu Yaoniang back then. Even if he asked them to try to change their fate first, and come to him, when they really couldn't bear it, he brought a few desperate people back with him on the way back to Kingshan City. Li Ju had a lot of projects on hand. It was easy to place a few people. Even the worst ones could be sent to the Barren Mountains to farm and patrol. The experimental fields at the Barren Mountain School have attracted many people's covetousness. The old man and the old lady were thinking about how to steal some seeds to go home every day, and they needed some people to guard and supervise. But Li Ju didn't want to do this. The existing business was mature and had its own way of recruiting people. If he just stuffed people in, how could Li Ju control others and prevent them from embezzling money in the future? Those who followed had to pass Wang Dechen's eyes and get permission from the various responsible persons. What if these people didn't get permission? They couldn't stay in Li Garden to do odd jobs. Li Ju was thinking about this, and when he looked up at Li Garden, everyone had a meal in Li Garden and then dispersed on their own. Fu Shushan's house was not ready yet, so Li Ju gave him the study room of his own house. Since he was going to be his apprentice, he had to teach him everything he knew in the future, and there was no need to be shy about anything. Fu Shushan was even more grateful. He thought that, no matter how magnanimous Li Ju was, he would wait for 3 years before letting him get involved in the core. Unexpectedly, he could live in Li Ju's study room on the first night. Li Ju's study room was full of books he had copied, as well as drawings that were drawn and undrawn. It could be said that they were the core secrets of the entire Li Garden. Now this pile of secrets was laid out on the table so bluntly for Fujiyui to read. Fujiyui was very honest and did not touch those secrets. He lay on the soft folding bed, and the moonlight shone in from the window that was not closed, shining brightly on the face of the sleepless man. It was the first time for him to live in such a special place. Whether it was comfortable or not was secondary. The key was this inexplicable care and expectation. There were many people who could not sleep on the same night. The fourth girl in Jinling was shyly waiting for her lover to marry her. Because time was running out, she was already preparing for her marriage. Every day, her longing for him would deepen. They had known each other for a short time, but they got along like fish in water. This was better than 90% of the women who married blindly. Yunan couldn't sleep well either. He was already very old, and he didn't know how long he could protect this family. Yu Fu was honest, Eugene was old-fashioned, and his youngest son was a rich and noble son. They were all people who had difficulty maintaining their wealth. The reason why Ma Spurs dared to attack the fourth girl was because the Yu family had no successors and would only become an ordinary wealthy family from generation to generation in the future. Even if Yu Fu and Eugene both had the reputation of great Confucian scholars, it was just a reputation after all. If they didn't hold prominent official positions, they would have no power. Without power, they would inevitably be oppressed by more powerful people. He didn't know whether Li Ju plus Fujiyui would be the optimal solution. Li Ju had divine help, and Fujiyui was ambitious. They were a good combination, but there were too many uncertainties in this combination, and he needed to find enough protection for the family. Under the protection of the family, marriage is one option, and betting is another option. But the current emperor is in his prime, and the princes are still young. If you bet too early, something bad might happen. It will take several generations for the family to decline, and there might be a genius who can turn the tide. But betting on the wrong horse will uproot you. Huang Zhi couldn't sleep either. He tossed and turned, making Zhu very uncomfortable. Madame Zhu couldn't help but get up, put on her clothes, light the lamp, and asked, "Azhi, are you feeling uncomfortable?" "No. It's my fault for making you worry." Huang Zhi also sat up, pulled Madame's sleeve, and asked her to go back to bed and lie side by side. The windows of his house were closed, and the moonlight cast the shadows of the trees on the window paper, which was lovely in light and dark. What is RZHI thinking about? Is it the brothers Barxiu, or little Yuan, or the children in our family? Thinking about Barxiu. You see, he just stayed at someone else's house for one night on the way to Jinling. When he came back this time, the people were very grateful to him. Some families with conflicts are willing to ask him to mediate. It is so difficult to gather the people's hearts, but it is easy for him. But he is incompatible with this world. I'm afraid that he will not be tolerated by the world, and that the world will be destroyed by him, fulfilling his words. When the country prospers, the people suffer. When the country perishes, the people suffer. Huang Zhi was afraid that Li Ju would rebel, and he was also afraid that others would think that Li Ju was going to rebel. Li Ju had money and food, and was willing to win the hearts of the people. 2 or 3 years would be fine. When Li Ju became famous and powerful in the south of the Yangtze River, would the court still be able to sit still? As long as one of the two parties lost patience, it would be a tragic end. The most terrifying thing is that Huang Zhi felt that Li Ju was right, and as long as Li Ju was given 20 or 30 years, he might really be able to change the world. Madame Zhu leaned on Huang Zhi's shoulder and said, "No. Brother Baxiu is very affectionate, and you have already entangled him with affection. How can the world not tolerate him? The world has been with him for a long time, and the world also likes him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230, Apprentice's First Career. Li Ju always had a good sleep. No matter how many things he had in mind, he could fall asleep as soon as he lay down when it was time to sleep. After all, he had no choice but to sleep when he was on a mission. Deep sleep helps to keep his mind clear and his limbs flexible. Entering deep sleep anytime and anywhere is one of his qualities. In the morning, Li Ju came back from exercise and was full of energy, while Fu Shushing, Huang Zhi, and the dumb man and Yu Yaoniang who followed him to Jinling all looked tired. However, because Fu Shushing was eager for the future, the look in his eyes was the most excited, which formed a sharp contrast with his dusty face. Although he was half a master, Li Ju could not actually teach him to read. Huang Zhi did not mind being the other half of the master, and let Fu Ga and Zhaoli and other local young men study with him to study and take exams. Li Ju only took him to do those businesses related to people's livelihood. The first thing was the resettlement of several people he brought back recently. After thinking about it, Li Ju decided to start a private postal system in a small area, or a small-scale express delivery work. Bicycles are now somewhat popular. Cement roads have connected most towns in Qingshan County and Shan'ang, and people have a certain literacy rate, which can basically be considered to have the initial potential for postal delivery. If a villager wants to sell or buy things in the county, or wants to visit friends and relatives in other places, he must spend a day on the road. With the postal system, it only takes 1 or 2 coins to send messages, buy and sell objects, and you can also ask the ancient courier to help confirm whether distant relatives and friends are safe and healthy. In the early stage, the users of this system can overlap with those of road maintenance. Anyway, the road maintenance people have to patrol the road sections they are responsible for every day, so it seems very convenient to let them take various express deliveries to the next node and hand them over to the next wave of people. Li Ju conceived the initial trial operation method and took Fuji Ui to find Zhao County Magistrate. The road maintenance team is semi-government and semi-private. He wanted to use the road maintenance team to build a postal system in the early stage. Of course, he must first do a good job in the county, and then deal with the joint venture. Fuji Ui was thrown such a big thing on the first day. He was trying to understand the situation while walking. He had too many questions. Ordinary people are so poor. The family's livelihood is only 20 taels of silver a year. After eating, sleeping, and dressing, it's good to have a surplus of 1 or 2 taels of silver. Are they willing to spend money to send this package or express delivery? The people in Qingshan are better off than other places. After a bumper harvest this year, they should have a little surplus. Moreover, the average daily income of people in Qingshan County is high, at least 10 cents a day. If you waste a day on something that is not worth 10 cents, you will suffer a heavy loss. They will do the math. So that's how it is. If there are 10 people on the road who want to send something to somewhere else or want to visit others, then having this postal route is equivalent to saving 9 jobs. These 9 jobs can be used for reading, farming, business travel, and work. After a year, it can add a lot of the production capacity you mentioned, right? More than that, it can also create many jobs. For example, the few people we brought back can be smoothly arranged. Now in the early stage, I believe that we don't have many people and the business will not be too prosperous. But as time goes by, more and more people will rely on this postal system, and by then there will even be a need for special postal merchants in the city. Fu Shushan nodded thoughtfully. Li Ju said again, this job is actually the folk version of the court's post. But the court's post relies on treasury funding, official roads, fast horses and quick feet, that is, official postmen. These 4 necessary conditions cannot be met by private post, so it is difficult to do it elsewhere. People are poor and will not be willing to spend money. If the road is not good, it is difficult to achieve sufficient transportation efficiency. If the efficiency is too low, people will naturally find that it is not cost effective to find someone to deliver. Without fast horses, transportation can only rely on manpower, slow speed, and small quantity. Without private quick feet who make a living from this, it is difficult to form a scale. Have you discovered that this is a scale industry? I don't understand. Industry of scale means that the more people use it, the lower the cost for each person, and the greater the profit obtained. This is true for buyers and sellers. If there is only one delivery man, he needs to collect the things that everyone wants to deliver from door to door, deliver them to various places, and then deliver them door to door. But if there is a large-scale delivery team, first collect the things in one place and hand them over to one person. He is only responsible for this matter. Of course, he will be familiar with the local roads and people, and get twice the result with half the effort. The transportation on the road is then handed over to a few specialized people, just like the court's official reports, which are also passed down from station to station. Except for the promulgation of the imperial edict, there has never been a precedent of one person being responsible to the end. Fu Shushan drew inferences from one example. Yes, when people send things, naturally they come from different places and go to different places. If one person is responsible, how many places can this person go in a day? But if there are dozens of people at the same time, it will be different. A is responsible for going from here to there, B is responsible for going from there to there, and C and D are there to pick up the things and then deliver the things that have been picked up to this village in that village. In this way, it is definitely more efficient than one person doing it all the time. Yes, this is the biggest difference between the delivery industry and peddlers. Speaking of which, those peddlers can be transformed into our express delivery companies on the spot. In addition, I plan to continue to build roads and improve vehicles. When appropriate, I will also intervene in the breeding and cultivation of donkeys, mules, and horses so that more livestock can be arranged to enter the transportation market. Li Ju started planning this matter as early as when he found that he might face transportation needs. It happened that there was a group of people who needed to be resettled, and the time was ripe, so the delivery system could be arranged. It also happened that this was a relatively new field to start from scratch, which was just right for Fu Gaya to get involved. Soon they arrived at Zao's house. Before Li Ju handed in his visiting card, the doorman had already let him in with a smile. The master has ordered that, whenever your master comes, no one should be stopped. Even if no one is at home, please have a cup of tea in the hall, and wait for a while. It happens that the master is at home today. Li Ju also smiled. I just chose the day when the county magistrate is on leave. Please open the door. The doorman smiled and asked the boy inside to report and lead the way. He took Li Ju to the main hall. The boys brought tea, and then Zao County Magistrate came. Li Ju introduced Fu Gaya to Zao County Magistrate. When Zao County Magistrate heard that he was both Li Ju's apprentice and Yujin's son-in-law, he called him nephew and said politely that his playboy was not as good as Fu Shushan, etc. After a set of polite words, both sides got to the point. Li Ju handed the book with the plan and map to Zhao Xiancheng and briefly introduced the short-term, medium-term and long-term plans, including employment, wages, fees, supervision, compensation, route planning, supporting system, traffic planning, and the livestock breeding mentioned before, as well as the benefits and expected benefits of this matter, etc. Zhao Ziancheng listened and looked, thought about the map and the distribution of villages, and calculated the traffic conditions of various villages and towns in the county and the close connection between the county and Shannyang. He said, "Sir, you have always been perfect and appropriate in doing things, and I always support you. I understand what you mean. I will tell the county magistrate about this matter privately tomorrow. The three of us will make an appointment and call a few Ganko to discuss it in detail. If we have reached an agreement, the joint venture will have 60% of the votes, and this matter will be successful. As for the government's finances, you can rest assured. If it is just the budget you just mentioned, there will be no problem. There is still a round of grain confiscation this year. Just looking at the first round of summer grain harvest, it is more than enough." Chapter 231 A Small Thing and a Big Thing. County Magistrate Zhao was very interested in Li Ju's new plan, both publicly and privately. Not only him, but also the wealthy families in Qingshan County who had a little extra money were paying close attention to Li Ju's movements. Li Ju was good at giving advice, and did not like to eat alone. As long as his strange demands were met, he did not mind anyone intervening in the industry he had created. On the contrary, the first batch of people who got involved would be exclusive. Therefore, any movement of Li Yuan would attract the attention of the entire Qingshan County and even the people sent by Shannyang. Li Ju went to County Magistrate Zhao's house, and the news spread throughout Qingshan County in less than an hour. So naturally, Li Ju received a lot of visiting cards that afternoon. This also gave Fu Shushan a new understanding of Li Ju's appeal. In Fu Shushan's mind, on the way back to Qingshan County, Li Ju was able to gather the common people, because the people were poor, and Li Ju could give them food and clothing for a while, which was people's hearts that could be bought. But in Qingshan County, Li Ju just went out, and there was no news at all. Those people came with silver bills and dividend contracts to grab a place to participate. This is not as simple as buying people's hearts. They have to be optimistic about Li Ju and trust him so much, to give up the profit so generously on a matter that has no shadow. Li Ju still took out a bunch of previous joint venture related charters to Fu Shushan, asking him to prepare to draft a charter for a private postal joint venture. This time is special, because the court's post system is operating normally, and their post system is parallel to the government post system, so they have to take the factors of the court and the government into consideration. In addition, the post raised by Li Yuan must be tied to the future road construction plan. If you want to build a road, you can't bypass the government. And this time the government does not have any demands on Li Yuan's industry like cement, pencils, etc. So Li Yuan must first settle the government when he develops the post system. Li Ju's plan was to use the idle manpower and the postman to patrol one place part-time to maintain the safety of one place, and to arrange special personnel to take charge of the flow of goods and letters, to reduce the scattered population flow among the people as reasons to persuade the government. The feudal dynasty hoped that its people would live and work within the designated scope and not move around everywhere, because the management cost and opportunity cost corresponding to population flow were too high. Fu Shushan wrote down all the points mentioned by Li Ju and then listed them in a text. There were too many nouns in Li Ju's expression that he didn't understand, so he had to ask Li Ju one by one. The combination of systematic learning and scattered consultation made Fu Shushan's learning progress by leaps and bounds. At least during the period of sorting out the charter of the joint venture, he basically understood Li Ju's basic summary of people's livelihood and economy. After Fu Shushan understood the various concepts of productivity, labor force, distribution system mentioned by Li Ju, he looked back at his doubts for more than 10 years, and it was like a sudden enlightenment. Li Ju was also very satisfied with Fu Shushan's ability to comprehend. He had many ideas and thought deeply, but he only lacked a direction. Once the essence of things was pointed out, Fu Shushan could quickly find the joints. For example, the question that Fu Shushan had expressed in the previous conversation about why his parents worked hard all year, but could only make a living, while some families did not produce anything but could enjoy the fruits of others' labor, was finally answered. Another day, County Magistrate Wu sent a letter to invite Li Ju and his apprentice to the government office to discuss the postal industry. The whole discussion process was relatively simple. The plan that Li Ju sent yesterday maintained the usual level, which was simple, concise, and complete, and not difficult to understand. County Magistrate Wu felt that there was a lot of room for improvement, so today he only came to discuss the details. All of them were the content of the formulation and execution of the plan, which was important but very cumbersome. Several Gankeo who were responsible for food, money, and household registration were also present to participate. Fuji Yui was just listening at first. After being called upon several times by Li Ju, he got into the topic with a little nervousness, then slowly let go of his nervousness and got into the state and performed well. Fuji Yui tried to keep up with the pace of Li Ju, County Magistrate Wu and others, instead of passively waiting for Li Ju to explain. Li Ju thought it was not bad. A person who has the ability to think, knows the limits, is proactive, and is quite sensitive can at least share more than half of the miscellaneous matters. If it is finally confirmed that Fuji Yui can accept some more modern theories, then he can share more. Everyone took a break twice in the middle of the agenda, and it was not until dusk that it came to an end. That is, when the general summary was confirmed, the Gankeo in charge of criminal names suddenly came to see a Yamen runner in a hurry. This surprised County Magistrate Wu. What could be so urgent that they couldn't wait for a while and had to interrupt their discussion? Li Ju was a guest who could make decisions. He was very considerate and said that official business was important. County Magistrate Wu then asked others to stay and finish the work, and he followed his subordinates to the open space between the government office and the back yamen. There were 2 corpses on the ground, and several yamen runners were carrying a dying man on a stretcher. County Magistrate Wu was shocked. 2 dead and 1 injured. It was indeed a serious case, and he might have to be rated poor in his evaluation this year. He hurriedly asked, "What's going on? Who is this?" Gankeo replied on his behalf, "Sir, please be at ease. They are not from this county, but from you." The villagers of Zaobaishu village reported a case the day before yesterday, and the brothers went there and brought them back. The only survivor is a villager from Dashangshu village in Yu County. According to him, their village was discovered by local tyrants for stealing and selling grain, and the whole village was set on fire. He escaped because he was not at home. The 2 people who escaped with him died yesterday due to serious injuries. I think this matter is very important, and I dare not delay, and I immediately rushed to report to you. County Magistrate Wu replied with an "You mean, there is a village massacre in Yu County? It is a massacre of the whole village. This is not an easy matter to handle. We cannot intervene in the affairs of Yu County, but human lives are at stake, so it is difficult for us to stand idly by. Moreover, there is a small matter in the middle, that is, the several thousand kilograms of rice sold privately by their village were sold to our county. This year is a bumpy year, and I heard that the 2 grain banks in various places have suppressed the price of rice to an extremely low level. Only our Dasan county is slightly better, and the price is the highest in our county. It is the only place where all grain stores implement the official price of the court. Therefore, nearby villages and towns all sell grain to Kingshan. According to this witness, they sold 2,000 kilograms of rice and returned, and when they were about to sell it again, they were discovered by the local grain store. In order to achieve the effect of killing 1 to warn the 100, the grain merchants killed people and burned the village in public and robbed them of all the silver they earned from selling grain. If this is true, my lord, it is extremely difficult to handle. County Magistrate Wu took a look at the only survivor, but he was a teenager with a dark face and dying, but there were no obvious external injuries. He ordered them to be sent to the county government's wing room and invited a doctor to see them. The 2 bodies had obvious signs of decay, so they were immediately sent to the corpse storage area for inspection. A coroner was immediately called in to perform an autopsy and properly handle the matter. The temperature was not low now, and if they were left there for a long time, there was a risk of causing plague. Chapter 232 Justice. Li Ju did not know about the massacre in Yu County at the first time. This was a criminal case, but in everyone's perception, Li Ju had nothing to do with criminal cases. His business scope was currently focused on the economy and people's livelihood. It was not until the establishment of Kingly Express and the recruitment of personnel, that Li Ju found that the person handed over by Fuji Ui was from Yu County next door, so he asked a question. Fuji Ui was already quite mature in handling affairs. If it had been a few months earlier, he might have been stumped by the question when he was still relatively young. But now, in order to complete his first task well, he had to pay as much attention as possible, and he knew the situation behind this list very well. This Yuasan is indeed from Dashangshu village, Yu County. He said that last month he and his fellow villagers pretended to be from Nanshan village, Kingshan County to sell grain in the city, and were discovered by the grain store in Yu County on their way back. The grain merchant Chen Zhangayao could not collect the grain, and could not rob the money, so he ordered his lackeys to beat the village chief to death in public, which caused resistance in their village. The two sides had a fierce fight, and there were casualties on both sides. The local villagers were very angry, and reported to the authorities on the grounds that the grain store was suppressing prices and hurting farmers. Unexpectedly, the person who reported to the authorities was beaten to death in the street as soon as he walked out of the government office, and their village was looted and burned by robbers in one night. At that time, Yuasan went to Nanshan village to deliver the money from selling grain and escaped. After returning to the village, he found 2 survivors and fled to Xiaobaishu village with the 2 survivors. They were rescued by the villagers and sent to the county town in their custody. According to the confessions of the 2 survivors, the robbers were pretended by the lackeys of the grain merchant Chen Zhangayao. Li Ju squeezed the cup in his hand and said, "Do you hope that I can do justice?" Fuji Ui did have his own little plans, and he didn't expect to hide them from Li Ju. Master is wise. Master, how did you figure that out? Did I ask you about Yu County just now? I was asking you about this person, but you described the murder case in their village so clearly, how could I not hear it? Let's find the county magistrate to confirm this matter sometime, and we can't just listen to one side of the story. Li Ju was not likely to get carried away by what he did. Even though he felt like a fire was burning in his heart after hearing the description, he was able to restrain himself. He had to wait to see definite evidence and understand the truth before making any plans. He meets our requirements. After recovering from his grief, he spent 2 days learning to ride a 2-wheeled bicycle and a 3-wheeled bicycle. He is now learning our family rules and postal regulations. He passed the postman exam yesterday. The tragedy of the massacre in the village did cause him great pain, but he did not become radical because of it. County Magistrate Wu is investigating the matter. Apart from asking about the progress and recalling the details every day, he did not show any manic emotions and was quite friendly to children. Li Ju nodded. People of this era are very resilient. They have suffered from childhood and their ability to withstand pressure is stronger than others. This is a blessing in disguise. When the meeting is organized, I want to meet him, mainly to judge whether what he said is true or not. Li Ju scheduled the interview, and Fuji Ui hurriedly wrote it down next to the list. Li Ju said, if what he said is true, then this matter cannot be resolved by Brother Wu. How can the local county magistrate control the affairs of the neighboring county? Moreover, from the fire in the granary in Yu County last year and the low grain prices this year, it can be seen that the officials of Yu, and even the officials of Huajia County may have problems. Even if Brother Wu sends an official document requesting Huajia County to assist in the investigation, it will most likely be left unresolved. Fuji Ui asked, then, are we just going to let it go? I'm unwilling to accept this. No matter what, they sold grain to Kingshan County, which led to this result. I always feel that I should do something for them. Li Ju replied, bad people will always be punished by God. Let's wait and see. It is not impossible that a thunderbolt will fall on their roof in a sunny day and burn their entire family. In a few days, Li Ju had put the phonetic notation of the postal system business notice on the display board and asked the hangers-on in the city and the peddlers who walked the streets to help pass the news to various villages so that the people in Kingshan County knew more or less about this business that could carry goods, letters, and errands, and also knew who to contact. Then Li Ju and Yuasan met. After repeated tempering during this period of time, Yuasan's emotions had stabilized a lot, but when he saw Li Ju, he still couldn't control his mixed feelings of sadness and joy. Li Ju was good, and his grain store joint venture would give people in the surrounding villages and towns hope to survive. But his family and the clansmen in the village were indeed beaten to death by the grain merchants because they stole grain. Li Ju didn't beat around the bush, but went straight to him to ask how the period from selling grain to slaughtering the village had developed step by step to the final result. Yu Yaoniang had repeated it many times. To satisfy Wu County magistrates' need to solve the case, to satisfy other people's curiosity, and even just to sell misery, to make himself feel better. He thought Li Ju was just curious, or wanted to appease him, so he numbly recounted the whole process. Li Ju interrupted from time to time, and asked some details, such as who made the decision to sell grain across the county, when to set out, how to look at the road at night, etc. It was very detailed. If you hadn't experienced it yourself, you would never know it so clearly. While Yu Yaoniang was answering, Li Ju observed his expression and body language. Interrogation is also a compulsory course. He may see through the performance of equally well-trained agents and movie stars, but there is absolutely no problem observing an ancient spy. Yu Yaoniang's words are actually contradictory and ambiguous, but this is more in line with the performance of a normal person. People's memories will deceive themselves, and when they speak, they will more or less beautify in a direction that is beneficial to themselves. Since it is not true, there must be loopholes. The more loopholes there are, the closer it is to the truth. After Li Ju asked, he knew that the sale of grain was true, and the massacre of the village was also true. The reason why Yu Yaoniang escaped was not necessarily because he happened to be out. It doesn't matter what he did. The first two are true, so it's fine. He poured Yu Yaoniang a cup of milk tea. The sugar content helps calm the anxious and tense brain, while the caffeine can mobilize people's enthusiasm, which is very useful for Yu Yaoniang at this moment. I'm sorry to ask you about your sad story, but this is necessary, and I hope you can understand. You are from Yu County, but your family's case was handed over to the magistrate of Kingshan County. If something goes wrong, the magistrate will be in trouble. Of course, I have to think more about the local officials. In addition, the express delivery has to go through the streets and alleys. The role you play is to go from the county seat to Bailu Bridge in Yaoniang County, a total of 100 miles. In summer, you can go back and forth on the same day, and in winter, you can go back and forth every other day, passing through 6 villages. This is a long way, and you have to deal with many people, and you are very smart, and you can endure what ordinary people can't endure, so I must make sure that you are a good and reliable child, and I have to be responsible to everyone. You are very good, and did not lie to me. I will find a way to get justice for you. Yu Yaoniang sat in his original position, silent, but he was convinced. From childhood to adulthood, even his parents have never apologized to him. They wronged him or misunderstood him, or hurt him, making him wait and work in vain. Even his parents who loved him the most never said the 3 words "I'm sorry." Yu Yaoniang fled with the last 2 survivors at the time, and he didn't even have time to bury his family. He didn't cry at that time, because he didn't have time to cry. The 2 survivors were unable to move, so he could only load them on the shaky cart that he dug out and push them away. His hands couldn't leave the broken bottom board for a moment, so how could he have time to wipe his tears? When he arrived in Kingshan County, he couldn't cry anymore. What justice was there to talk about? He had to seek medical treatment for the living, to seek justice, and to find a way to survive for himself. Life is like this. If you are very poor, desperate, and isolated, your brain can only serve survival, and you don't even have the qualifications to cry. Master, Li Ju thought he was excited for justice, and patted his shoulder. I mean what I say, you wait patiently, and do your job well. In a few years, save money to find a wife, and have some chubby babies. Your parents in heaven will be happy to see you. Chapter 233 Fuziaoguia. Magistrate Wu sent the relevant case files to Sima Shao in accordance with the official system. After obtaining permission, he and the magistrate of Yu County also transferred the case files at the same time, hoping that the matter could be resolved in Yu County. However, Magistrate Wu concealed the information that there was another surviving witness. At present, it seems that there is a high possibility of collusion between officials and businessmen. If he directly said that there was another surviving witness, perhaps this witness would not survive. While waiting for Yu County to deal with the case, Liju's postal industry was tentatively opened for business. The postmen who connected the villages and the members of the road maintenance team who were responsible for express delivery all changed into uniform express uniforms and started the first round of service. The road maintenance team is like the aorta, transferring parcels, letters, and service needs from one place to another, and the village postmen are like capillaries, collecting people's needs from every corner and handing them over to the road maintenance team to deliver them to the destination. Of course, postal services cannot blossom everywhere overnight. After all, only a few people are willing to spend a little more money and food to try a new service. However, judging from the growth and stable volume, it is still very marketable in the short term. Married daughters, relatives working in the city, students studying in other places, friends who have been separated for a long time. People always have relatives and friends in other places, or things that need to be done in other places, so just leave it to Kingly Express. New industries with markets can certainly solve the jobs of some people smoothly, including some people brought back by Liju on the way to and from Jinling. Although the industry is new and the market is just starting, all aspects are still very exciting. Fu Shushan participated in and presided over the construction of some keynotes throughout the process and wrote a thick notebook as the conclusion of his first large-scale project. After the whole process, he had a new understanding that the industry that Liju mentioned must only be opened in Qingshan County. In addition to the demand, remuneration, and infrastructure determined by the economic level, the high literacy rate of Qingshan County people is also a very prominent advantage. Most of the people in the city can check and sort out the address of the recipient by themselves, and there are at least 5 or 6 people who can read Pinayan in a village in the countryside. They do not need to rely on the few educated people and can complete all the preparations by themselves, including but not limited to confirming the mailing address, preparing packages and letters, etc. Fu Shushan did a good job on his first job. Liju held a small celebration banquet for him, which was also a formal introduction to his apprentice. Old Liu brought Ning, Old Chen brought Wang, County Magistrate Wu brought his father and daughter, and there were also Old Huang and Old Yu, the potters and field heads who were responsible for many affairs in the Barren Mountain, as who was decorating and filling the model house, the head of the day and society, and several younger generations that Liju favored, such as Chu Sanlang, Shibalang, Jeteng, etc. Crowded and filled the private room and the lobby. After the celebration banquet, Liju handed over the deed and key of a small house next door to Fu Shushan. In exchange, Fu Shushan might have to work for Liju for free to pay off his debts for the next half of his life. However, he probably didn't think it was a debt repayment, but a reward. Then Fu Shushan entered the second large industry in his life, the breeding industry. Yes, Liju sent the groom who was about to go to Jinling to raise chickens, ducks, cattle, pigs and sheep. Whether it is to deal with the remaining grain processing scraps, or to improve the efficiency of transportation, or to optimize people's dietary structure, it is necessary for Qingshan County to put the breeding industry on the agenda. Because it may take some time from the beginning of this matter to the final implementation, it is necessary to establish the project in advance. Just like Liju established the project for ground film and greenhouse at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, and until now, the close combat of this matter is still zero. After Fu Shushan got Liju's plan, he had to prepare for the marriage. After repeated thinking, he entrusted his fellow villagers and the carriage and horse business to take his parents to Qingshan County. Fu Shushan has always been very secretive about his parents. Liju thought that he was not going to let his parents come, or that his parents were mavericks, which made Fu Shushan very reluctant to let outsiders see his parents. In theory, such a big event as marriage should be held at home. Fu Shushan's home is in Jiahu County, so from a purely theoretical point of view, Fu Shushan should get married at his home. However, since he brought his parents to Qingshan County, it is acceptable to treat this house in Qingshan County as his own home. After all, he married the granddaughter of the Yu family. In order to save face for his in-laws, it is reasonable to leave the countryside and go to the city to pick up the bride. After the Yu family discussed with Liju and consulted with the fourth girl's own wishes, they decided to send the fourth girl to Qingshan. living with the husband is common sense, but if the economic strength of the two families is too different, it is not uncommon for the wife to live with the wife instead of marrying into the family, or to choose another house to settle down. Fu Shushan did not expect that Mr. Yu would agree that his beloved granddaughter would follow him, a grassroots who had accomplished nothing and lived under the protection of his master. He was even more grateful and panicked. His parents, in Fu Shushan's panic, the two elders of the Fu family came and brought Fu Shushan's younger sister. As a master, Li Ju came forward to receive the two old men without the permission of his apprentice's parents. It's not entirely true to say that they are old men. Fu Shushan's father is 45 years old, a middle-aged and taciturn farmer. Fu Shushan's mother is only 36 years old, and she is quite beautiful. Regardless of generation, Li Ju can only call her sister when he sees her. Their little daughter has just turned 10 years old, and her eyebrows vaguely resemble her parents. Li Ju finished his stammering greetings with the two of them, and probably had some understanding. Fu Dad said he was a farmer, but the calluses on his hands were in the wrong position. Those hands were more like butchers than farmers. The three members of the Fu family were very reserved, and they really didn't look like they would cause trouble. Li Ju knew that in this era, the status of butchers was very low, especially butchers who did not engage in production labor and only slaughtered pigs and cattle. Except for occasionally eating some scraps of meat, they really had no social status at all. Looking at Fu Gai's appearance, it was also known that his family had no money, and it was unlikely that he would buy a few acres of land to fight for the identity of a farmer. Although Fu Shushan looked unhappy, he finally brought his parents and sister back home. He went out with his little sister in his arms. Perhaps because he often saw Li Ju holding Yu and Yi and other little girls, his movements were exactly the same as Li Ju's. Li Ju sent their family to the newly opened west corner gate. Fu Shushan's small house was one corridor away. The small house with two entrances and a front and backyard was more than enough for two families. The huge peach tree in the front yard was full of fruits, which was an auspicious sign. After settling his family, Fu Shushan, accompanied by Yu Fu and his wife, took the people sent by Li Ju to Jinling to welcome them. If everything goes well, they will be back in a month. Yunnan agreed to his daughter's marriage to Qingshan County. In addition to the fact that Qingshan County had two people, Li Ju and Yu Fu, who could make him feel at ease, there were other conditions in exchange. For example, Fu Shushan agreed to hold a wedding in Jinling first, stay for a few days, and then take half of the family property back to Qingshan, after returning home to hold another wedding. It was very rude and insulting for the man's parents not to attend the wedding, but Fu Shushan didn't think anything of it, and even seemed to be happy about it. Fu Shushan's behavior didn't seem like he would despise his parents because he was snobbish. Fu Shushan's parents also seemed to be honest and decent. Li Ju didn't know what kind of contradiction could make Fu Xiaoguya not want his parents to attend the wedding. Chapter 234, The Shadow of Fu Xiaoguya. Fu Xiaoguya went to Jinling, but his parents and sister stayed in Qingshan County. It was impossible for Li Ju to let this unfamiliar family of three live next door. He had to visit them every now and then, and if they wanted to cook at home, he could see if they would like to join him. After a few days, Fu's father, Fu's mother, and Fu Xiaomi opened their hearts to Li Ju. Fu's father and Fu's mother kept their mouths shut about the disagreement between Fu Xiaoguya and his family. According to common sense, Li Ju's ability to read people's expressions and the Fu family's honest and bad lying character would allow him to guess what he should have guessed. But Li Ju just didn't guess it. He was a modern man. When he went to ancient times, he spent 3 years in economics, industry, and culture. He came into contact with people like Sanjiu, who was a widow with a lot of suitors, and Yu Yaoniang, who could sell herself directly to resist marriage. He really couldn't remember the ancient concept of chastity. It was not until Li Ju mentioned by chance that Fu Xiaoguya would take the examination for the scholar with the son of the county magistrate after marrying that he needed someone to guarantee him, and that his family background was clean. And then the fellow villager whispered that Li Ju never paid attention to the 3 chastities and 9 loyalty, and treated prostitutes and servants like ordinary people, meaning that if you have any hidden dangers, Tell Master Li as soon as possible, otherwise it might implicate Fu Xiaoguya when it is discovered in the future that the couple hesitantly confessed the truth to Li Ju. It turned out that Fu Niang had remarried. Jiahu County was conservative, especially the several county magistrates were all book reading near Confucianists, who strictly followed the 3 cardinal guides and 5 constant virtues and the 3 chastities and 9 loyalty. With such an atmosphere and such a county magistrate, it is conceivable what attitude the entire Jiahu County would have towards women who remarried and did not keep their chastity. Could Fu Niang not remarry? Didn't she love her husband very much? How could she remarry with her husband's son? How could she not bear the loneliness in the deep house? The answer is no. Because a chaste and virtuous woman cannot support her son. A very realistic problem lies before her. A family without an adult male, both the mother and the son are fat meat that can be cut on the street. Fu Niang wanted to make a scene at first. She wanted to ask for a chastity archway. This is a good thing, a supreme honor. There are only a few in the whole village. With such an archway, the whole Fu family will be glorious, and scholars will be looked up to when they go out to study. But when Fu Niang applied for the archway, she was rejected because the county magistrate did not believe that a beautiful woman in her 20s could keep her chastity and endure loneliness. Fu Niang applied for the archway 3 times, and the same thing happened every time. The last time, the clerk secretly hinted to her that if she wanted to apply for the archway, she had to commit suicide to follow her husband. The market is hot this year. There are several widows in front of her who are applying for the archway. The first one cut off her little finger, the second one destroyed her face, the third one dug out her eyes, and the fourth one has sealed all the doors and windows of her house, leaving only a small hole for passing things and weaving in the house for a living. Fu Niang's husband died a little late. If Fu Niang wanted to ask for a memorial archway, she had to be more determined than the previous 4. After thinking about it, it seemed that there was no other way except to die with her husband. Fu Niang went home and hanged herself beside her husband's grave, but she did not die. She was saved by her aunt who was visiting the grave in the same village. Seeing that she was still trying to commit suicide, the aunt asked her to go home and see her children. Half of the reason why Fu Niang wanted a memorial archway was for Fu Jiui. Fu Jiui was good at studying and was the top student in the village school. As a woman, it was difficult for her to support her son's education. However, if she could ask for a memorial archway for the village clan school would always give Fugia some assistance and preferential treatment for the sake of the memorial archway. But when Fu Niang rushed home, she saw her son playing by the well, and the clan elders laughed and coaxed Fugia to jump into the well. The Fu family originally had a small fortune, and after the husband died, the brothers divided it up almost completely, leaving only a Lois house and 5 new of thin land. However, the villagers were even eyeing this little bit of property. They wanted both the chastity archway and the property, and they didn't want to raise Fugia. Then Fu Niang didn't dare to die. If the archway was gone, it was gone. Fu Jiui was smart. She cultivated the thin land carefully, spun more yarn, and wove more cloth, and gritted her teeth to support the students on government stipends. If she passed the examination, she would have food from the government, and could continue to survive. Obviously, the villagers didn't think so. Many of them had never seen a woman in their lives. Such a big and beautiful woman was placed there, and there was only a 4 or 5-year-old child at home. Isn't that just right? On the night that Fu Niang was rescued from suicide, she was raped by the villagers. It was unknown how many people came, and there might even be relatives of her late husband among them. Anyway, she struggled and asked for help, but no one paid attention. She closed the door tightly, but it was useless. The broken lock could not lock anyone in, and the cross bolt fell off with a push. The next day, someone still came to rape her. Some people had a little conscience and were willing to leave her food, while some people were simply heartless. Fu Niang shrank at home like a frightened bird every day, but was scolded by the rapist as a seductive little whore, a shameless and stinky bitch. On the 3rd day, her door was demolished. The people who came to have fun disliked kicking the door and simply demolished the door panel. From then on, everyone could enter her house and come and go, as if they were in an empty space. On the 4th day, Fu Niang was lying on the bed and couldn't get down, and the aunt who saved her jumped in, pushed her to the ground, sat on her, and slapped her more than a dozen times, making Fu Niang's eyes see stars and her ears buzz. The aunt scolded her for being shameless, cheating on men, pretending to be a chaste and heroic woman, but actually being a secret prostitute, seducing the men in the village to death, and she should not have saved her if she had known this would happen. The aunt's husband also cheated on her, and he was still a man with a little conscience. He left an egg and 2 pancakes for Fu Niang and Fu Xiaoguya. This little bit of food was discovered by the aunt. That was 15 years ago, and the world was far from being as peaceful and calm as it is now. A bite of food could make a beggar beat a person to death, not to mention the eggs that were to be sold for money. The aunt grabbed her husband, and he said that it was Fu Niang who seduced him and blackmailed him after the deed was done. The aunt had to believe it no matter whether it was true or not, and she came over and beat him up. Fu Niang couldn't die at this time. If she died now, even the memorial archway that had a 1 in 10,000 chance of protecting Fu Gaya would be gone, and she would have nothing. At this time, Fu Niang's luck, which had been unlucky all the way, was only lit up by getting married and having children. She finally met the current Fu Dai. Fu Dai was also from the village, but he married into a butcher's family in the town early and took good care of the family. Unexpectedly, his wife died of illness, so his wife's family adopted a son and drove Fu Dai out. Fu Dai was penniless and had nowhere to go, so he thought about returning to the village to find a place to stay. On the first day he returned to the village, he saved Fu Niang. It is true that Fu Niang is a person who goes with the flow, but she also has a strong will. She will still resist after staying in hell for 7 or 8 days. Her futile resistance lasted for 7 or 8 days. Finally, on that full moon night, she waited for the only person who was willing to save her. That was Fu Dai. Chapter 235 Fu Gaya's Psychological Shadow 2. Fu Jiu's stepfather, Fu Dai, learned the skills of slaughtering and castrating pigs and chickens from his father-in-law's family. He was also big and strong, with a broad back and strong waist, and extremely strong strength. He had a good character, otherwise he would never let his Yu family bully him to that extent. Seeing injustice on the road, he went up without thinking, and beat away all the people who bullied Fu Niang, and saved this beautiful young widow. The few days that Fu Dai was in the village, he protected Fu Niang for a few days. Fu Niang finally had a few good days. No one dared to bully her. She could finally wear clean clothes, and clean up the abandoned farmland. Fu Dai lingered in the village for half a month. His family's property had been divided up as early as when he married into the family, and even the broken house was not left. He had to stay in other people's homes, thinking about doing something serious. His job as a butcher was really too lowly, but he wanted to become a farmer. He had no land and no money, so he had to help others farm to make a living. Father Fu was indeed very strong, worked quickly and well, and learned things quickly. The families in the village who hired him to farm were very satisfied. But Father Fu had a big appetite and could eat 3 times as much as others in one meal. Those employers were not happy, and gradually the food they gave him became visibly rotten. First, the bean rice and water chestnut soup turned into bran porridge and wild vegetables. It was already the end of summer, and the wild vegetables were old and very difficult to eat. Father Fu didn't mind, as long as he could eat enough. Later, even the bran porridge was gone, leaving only the soup that was so thin that you could shine your eyes in it, and a sour and smelly paste mixed with something unknown. But Mother Fu couldn't stand it anymore. She knew that Father Fu took care of her and secretly frightened a few gangsters, and she was silently grateful. But her reputation was very bad now. She would be spat on when she worked in her own garden. She didn't dare to express it publicly. What if she brought bad reputation to Father Fu? It would be a real sin. She rolled the remaining food at home with wild vegetables into balls and sent a bowl to Fu Dad every day. If she saw that Fu Dad's clothes were damaged, she would quietly bring them back, mend them and send them back. After a few visits, the two finally became familiar with each other. The man had never had anyone take care of him like this in his life, except his own mother, and the woman really couldn't live without the head of the family. The two most miserable people came together like this, and finally decided to pack up the last valuables in the family and quietly leave the village at night. to settle down in the neighboring county town. After that, they were recognized many times, and moved many times, and only returned to Jiahu County a year ago for Fuzhou's exam. The atmosphere in Jiahu County is like that. They don't like widows who remarry, so this pair of butchers and widows is the real bottom in Jiahu County. If it weren't for Fudad's strength, I don't know where they are now. Another year later, the couple received news from their son that their son recognized a nobleman as his master and was about to marry the granddaughter of a noble family as his wife. They were at a loss. They didn't know who King Shenliju was, nor who Old Master Yu was. Their son was going to get married, and they were the last to know the news. Their son had found a master who had the right to deal with their son like parents according to etiquette and law. They were also the last to know. The couple had no choice but to be put in a carriage like quails in a cage and sent here, lighting up the greatest luck in their lives. Fu Niang only thought that it was because she remarried to a butcher that Fu Jiuyuai was worried that she would ruin his innocence as a scholar, but she didn't expect that there was another reason. That is, Fu Jiuyuai's childhood memory was vague. Fu Jiuyuai remembered the men who came in and out of his house, remembered some whispers, remembered that the aunt beat his mother and called his mother a secret prostitute. He thought his mother really did something flesh and blood. After being taken to the town by Fudad, Fu Jiuyuai, who had been living in the town, had no idea of the truth inside. But even so, Fu Jiuyuai was too ashamed to talk about family affairs. He would still earn money to send home, still bring snacks to his sister, still call his stepfather dad, and still do housework, but he subconsciously avoided the situation at home. Fu Shushan did not hide anything about the Yu family, of course. This made the fourth girl love him even more, and the two young people inevitably made vows under the moonlight. One said that, if I go first, you must never have this idea, and you must find another good man to live happily together. And the other said that, if I have this intention, I will be struck by lightning and so on. And their feelings naturally reached a new level. Although Eugene didn't like the fact that his mother-in-law remarried, it didn't bother him at all. Fu Jiuyuai's future depended mainly on Li Ju. Eugene only frowned and didn't mess up the marriage. He still hoped that this marriage would save his daughter. But it didn't matter if his mother-in-law had problems. There were many sons-in-law of other families who had problems, and they just endured it. It took Li Ju several days to sort out the affairs of the Fu family, and his face turned black at that time. Fu's father and mother thought he was dissatisfied with them, and they were too shy to say anything. But Li Ju was not angry because of this, but because he thought of more. Fu Niang could ask for a chastity arch for the village, and Fu Gia was good at studying, and had a bright future. They were unwilling to let go of these two people, so what about the other children and women in the village? Fu Xiaomui timidly hugged Fu Niang's arm, and said to Li Ju, "My lord, please don't be angry, I'm afraid." Li Ju took out a big red apple from his sleeve, and handed it to her. "Be good, uncle is not angry, you can eat it." After comforting the little girl, Li Ju asked Fudad for the address of his hometown village in Jiahu County, saying that he just wanted to confirm whether it was true. Fudad and Fu Niang did not doubt him, so they told the truth about their hometown village. Li Ju compared the map in his mind, and suddenly his eyes lit up. "Isn't this near Yu County? What a coincidence." Let's not talk about what Li Ju is planning. He still has to find a handy tool. In addition, the news of Yu County is not confirmed, so Li Ju can only wait. The doctors and runners who supported the two roads of Yanzhou came back. They were away for more than a year, and it took more than half a year to stop and go on the road. The rest of the time was spent in the local epidemic area, treating diseases, saving lives, and vaccinating, and by the way, writing medical books to popularize Li Yuan's medical science. The governor of Heksha County saw that the doctors had brought the epidemic under control after arriving here, and also improved the survival rates of local mothers, newborns, and children. He could not help but be greedy, and wanted to keep these doctors in the local area. The governor of Heksha County gave money and property, and even used the beauty trap. If it were not for the governor Wang who passed by Heksha when he took office, and helped to send them off, I'm afraid that these doctors would not have returned now. Such doctors returning to the city must of course be welcomed and greeted with great ceremony. The things rewarded by His Majesty the Emperor also need to be handed over to them with a ceremony. It happened that this year was a bumpy year, and the second round of grain had been planted. Everyone could slow down a little, and it was just right to hold a grand ceremony for everyone to have fun together for 2 days. Such a grand ceremony naturally fell on the head of Day and Society, so Day and Society rushed a short play called Triumph overnight, and gave it to everyone to sing it well, specifically to welcome the doctors. Li Ju and the wealthy people in the city certainly could not fall behind. They set up tables on both sides of the road, placed fresh flowers and fruits, and hung colorful lanterns. They invited dragon and lion dance teams to perform in circles around the center of the city. Following the team were Guanyin giving dew and heavenly maidens scattering flowers. There were loud gongs and drums, and melodious stringed instruments. The excitement was far better than New Year's Day. Chapter 236, Unsolved Case. Li Ju stood on the Dayu Tower, which had the best view, with his hands folded, and looked at the situation on the street. The runners, the county magistrate, and the doctors were all showered with flowers and fruits, and even Yu Yaoniang was no exception. The emperor's reward and honor allowed people of ordinary or even low status to have considerable status and honor. It was a good thing. Doctors were often listed with the workers, and Yu Yaoniang was even a midwife, whose status was slightly lower than that of ordinary people. This time, they enjoyed such treatment under the auspices of the county magistrate, and their status would certainly be improved in the future. In the long run, more people would be willing to study medicine. Fan Zhangyan had a famous saying, not a good prime minister, but a good doctor, which gave the word medicine a different meaning. At present, medicine is still in the exploratory stage. Everyone knows that this medicine is for that disease, but they don't know the reason. In addition, the lack of anatomical knowledge and insufficient understanding of the human body have led to the development of medicine in a relatively advanced stage in the world for a long time, but lacking a scientific system and slow improvement. Li Ju felt that, as long as the status of doctors was slightly improved, combined with the dialectical methods and existing achievements of modern medicine, it should be no problem to improve people's survival rate and prolong their lifespan. If these 2 points can be achieved, the status of doctors and the importance of medicine will naturally be guaranteed. The same is true for other types of work. In recent years, because the commodity economy in Qingshan County is very active, the status of craftsmen has been slightly improved. They have become an important part of government revenue. In the last year of poor harvest, the tax revenue even accounted for 60% of the grain tax. This is a terrifying data. Even if the tax revenue of the commodity economy is very heavy, even if this is a year of poor harvest, considering that Daeong has only been stable for a few years and has just started to recover a little bit, this 60% is incredible. The same is true for butchers. Of course, if this butcher can develop in the direction of breeding, it will be even better. In any case, Fu Xiaoguya is already his apprentice. He will be enslaved for decades in the future. It is also right to help him solve some family affairs. Li Ju watched the excitement and returned to Li Garden on time, giving each doctor another gift from Li Garden. Those who left Li Garden were free if they were willing to start their own business, and those who wanted to continue to study medicine stayed. The rewards and gifts they received were enough for them to buy a few acres of land in Qingshan County, build a few small courtyards, and live a comfortable life as rich men. Unexpectedly, but also seemingly reasonable, several medical apprentices who left Li Garden chose to stay and continue to work and study part-time, and those doctors who applied to go to the epidemic area also asked in a roundabout way if they could bring their own tuition and living expenses to study. The medical methods demonstrated by the apprentices in Li Garden had so many new things, and they were so reasonable and effective, that they were all tempted. Not only them, but also the governor's ire of Heksha County wanted to keep people because of this. If the governor Wang had not arrived in time, I'm afraid that Yu Yaoniang would have been married home as a daughter-in-law by the wealthy family of Heksha County. In the past year, the doctors in the 2 provinces of Yanzhou, as well as the imperial doctors sent by the court, have been questioning, being slapped in the face, attending classes, questioning again, being slapped in the face again, and learning again. Li Yuan is indeed particularly unique in surgery, colds, and human cognition, and they can't help but believe it. Li Ju raised his eyebrows and wrote a letter by hand, asking Yu Yaoniang and others to take it to the school. If you want to attend the class, just come. He won't provide food and accommodation, but he won't charge tuition, which is quite cost effective. The conditions are that you must practice medicine for half a day every day for free, and you must abide by the classroom discipline. If you violate these two conditions, it is impossible to ask for classes, even if you hold 1,000 taels of gold. The doctors supported the two provinces of Yanzhou and completed the task successfully, which made the people of Qingshan very proud. For a time, several counties in the south of the Yangtze River could hear rumors about how the people of Qingshan solved the most troublesome problem, smallpox, but some things disappeared as they were passed on. For example, the rumor that Fu Xiaoguya heard in Jinling was that God couldn't bear to see people suffer, so he sent a 3-meter tall immortal named Li to teach the people of Qingshan an immunity method, and ordered them to save people. Fu Xiaoguya was stunned for a moment, then came to his senses, and guessed that immortal Li was Li Ju. He felt a little funny and a little worried, so he couldn't help but write a letter back to inform Li Ju. Li Ju was afraid that he would be known as a supernatural being, so he had to hold back and endure some things. Now there were rumors that were made up, and he couldn't help but take it to heart. He didn't care about this matter himself, so he could only ask Huang Zhi and Zhao Ziancheng, two old foxes, for help. Sure enough, an expert can tell whether there is any right or wrong with just one move. Within 2 days, rumors spread even more wildly, saying that Li Ju was a fox who had transformed to deceive people, that Li Ju was the medical saint Sun Simiao who had come down to earth to experience tribulations, that he could transform into 72 different forms, 36 different magic spells, that he had a golden eye, that his hair could turn into 100 doctors to see patients everywhere. Oh my god, what the hell is going on? It's like a monkey. Women, children and young children in Jiangnan all knew that there was a great sage Sun Wukong in journey to the west. After hearing such rumors, they naturally laughed it off and no one was willing to take it seriously. As expected, they slowly let it go. By the end of September, the doctors were studying medicine every day, the world was peaceful, and it was time to take good care of the crops. The excitement was reduced a bit, and finally the matter was let go. At this time, County Magistrate Wu finally got a chance to invite Li Ju to have a drink in private. He set up exquisite side dishes and wine brewed from sweet potatoes produced in Li Garden. There were only 2 people and their confidants at the table. One was a mute, and the other was County Magistrate Wu's 2 bodyguards. After 3 rounds of drinking, County Magistrate Wu complained, "I can't handle the matter in Yu County. Last month, my colleague sent back the case file, saying that a village in Yu County was destroyed by a spreading wildfire. Chen Zhangayao is a good man in the local area. He never killed people, slaughtered the village, or burned the bodies to destroy the evidence. This is a false accusation. Please bring the false accuser to the authorities for trial." Li Ju said, "Bullshit. There were typhoons and heavy rains in July and August, and the mountains and forests were moist. How could a wildfire burn down a village?" County Magistrate Wu said, "I also think this is impossible. Yu County has many swamps and wetlands, and water birds love to spend the winter there. How could a wildfire start? Even if there was, it was not this season. Moreover, Dazhangshu village is adjacent to Xiaobaishu village. People in Xiaobaishu village said that they did see some traces of fireworks, but they were not heavy, just like burning straw. If it was a wildfire, Xiaobaishu village should have fled for their lives. In this season, the wind comes from the southeast. Aren't the mountains near Dazhangshu village southeast of Xiaobaishu village? Even if there is a wildfire, it will only burn towards our county." This is what County Magistrate Wu did with the geography knowledge taught by Li Ju. He felt that Yu County Magistrate was talking nonsense. He dipped tea and drew a map of the 2 places. "Isn't this the case?" He pointed at the location of Dazhangshu village and said, "I refuted the rumor that the mountain fire was nonsense. Even if it wasn't Chen Zhangayao who set the fire and massacred the village, there should be a reason. At least we should find out the truth to warn future generations and let us be on guard." but the Yu County magistrate ignored me and only asked who made the false accusation. He seemed determined to find out who it was. I couldn't say that it was Yuasan who reported the case. I could only say that the 2 people who were saved from the fire were dead. The Yu County magistrate said that, since this was the case, there was no evidence, and the case was just an unsolved case. I sent another letter to inquire, but it was like a drop in the ocean. No news came back. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237, Keeping Guests. Li Ju was extremely angry in his heart, but he did not show it on his face. He just asked, in your opinion, how true is Yuasan's testimony? Magistrate Wu said, at least 80%. The messenger made some inquiries in the local area and was told that when this grain merchant was mentioned, passers-by were silent and quickly waved their hands. He went through a lot of trouble to learn from a family that this grain merchant had indeed set fire to an entire family in order to rob his rivals. Li Ju said, he is truly worthy of death. Magistrate Yu doesn't care. Magistrate Wu replied, Magistrate Yu can't do anything, and he doesn't want to. He receives hundreds of thousands of taels of silver a year as tributes from all over the country. Who wouldn't be tempted? If this is true, even I would feel envious for a moment when I heard about receiving hundreds of thousands of silver a year for free. I have the least worries about food and drink, and even I'm like this, let alone others. Li Ju sneered 3 times and said nothing more. He just drank the bowl of sweet wine left on the table and sat there in silence, not knowing what he was thinking. County Magistrate Wu had other plans when he came to see him. Seeing that he seemed to understand, he did not need to explain everything. Instead, he smiled and advised his guards and the mute to eat more. A few days later, the newly married Fu Shushan brought Yue back to Qingshan County and held another wedding ceremony, which was considered to be a complete completion of the marriage. Yu Fu came to Li Ju to drink the next day. From his description, it can be seen that he was very satisfied with Fu Ge. At Fu Yui's age, it was extraordinary. Yu Fu was a little naive, but he had eaten so many years of rice. It would be difficult for Fu Yui to deceive him. He could only rely on his true personality to impress him. Yu Fu naggled for a while, and finally said with emotion, forget about other things. I have seen geniuses and prodigies. In terms of character and ability, it is difficult to surpass you. I only value his sincerity to the 4th girl. The next day, Fu Yui and his wife came to visit. Li Ju observed carefully. The young couple was really sweet. The 4th girl was innocent and naive, and Fu Yui took care of her so well that the single man was so upset. Li Ju was half a father to Fu's Aogi, so he invited them to dinner. When Fu's father and mother met Li Ju alone, they were fine and could act like normal people, but in the presence of their son, the parents would still shrink back. However, it was not entirely true to say that Fu Yui did something wrong. He served tea and dishes to the 4th girl, and also served tea and dishes to his mother and little sister. It can only be said that some things cannot be smoothed out by time, and cannot be restored to their original state by untying the knot in the heart. After the meal, father and mother Fu said they wanted to go back to their hometown. Fu Yui frowned and said, what is there to go back to? This place is not as good as Jiahu. Li Jiu guessed that Fu Yui had a grudge against Jiahu, so he glared at Fu Yui and told him to sit down and shut up. He advised father and mother Fu Mingsh. Fu Yui's name may sound childish, but he is right. But the house here is not good, or the neighbors are not harmonious, and you two are not used to living here, so you want to go home. Father Fu was even dumber, so mother Fu hurried out and said, how could that be? This is what they often call a fairyland life. How can it be bad? It's just that we are used to being rough and stupid, and we are not destined to enjoy the good life. It's better to go back to the countryside to be more comfortable. Li Jiu thought that they might be worried about disturbing the life of the young couple. The 4th girl was the apple of the eye of the Yu family, so she was naturally proud. She might not get along with her parents-in-law who made a living in the countryside. It would be better to give them some time and space to slowly adjust. So he said, how about this arrangement? Fu Xiaoge's house is a little small. With 5 people living there, plus the maids and servants, there won't be much room. Let's just make do with it for a few days. Let Xiaoge rent a small yard for you two to live in. It's convenient to travel between the two of you, and you won't bother each other when you eat and dress. If you two want to do something to make a living, it's very easy. Kingshan City is short of people in every industry, so what kind of work is hard to find? Sister Fu knows how to do needlework, so she can go to music clothing store and take some delicate work home to do. The 4th girl smiled and said, Master has spoiled me too much and has also thought Fu Lang too heartless. How can a child leave his parents to live alone outside? In my opinion, we should ask dad, mom, and little sister to continue to stay. As for the people we brought, 4 of them, who are responsible for laundry, cooking, and sweeping, will be enough. The others are only there to protect our family and manage our property and contacts. They don't have to live with us. We can just rent 2 houses nearby. It won't be difficult to send someone to call them if there is anything. When we have made it in the future, we can move to a garden, and that will be great. Fugia glanced at his wife and was so grateful that he couldn't express it, but when he spoke to his parents, he said, Aya has said so, what else are you dissatisfied with? Li Ju just found it funny. The 4th girl's face froze, but she also knew that the rift between her parents-in-law and her husband could not be eliminated in a short time, so she had to continue to smooth things over. I'm the only newcomer in the family. If parents want to go home because of me, it means it's my fault. Parents must not like me, that's why they want to leave us here. In that case, let's go to Jiahu County. If parents are not happy, I will beg them. As for Fu Lang's studies, we'll have to wait until later. Sob. The 2 sobs were very vivid. Father and Mother Fu and Scholar Fu all changed their faces. One of them defended himself by saying don't worry, girl. We love each other enough and so on, and the other just held his wife's hand. He wanted to say something, but every time he opened his mouth, he was stepped on by the 4th girl. Li Ju waited for them to interact for a while, and then saw that the 4th lady persuaded Fu Dad and Fu Niang to stay, and then he said, the 4th lady's idea is good. There is no rush. I will ask the broker to help me find a house. When I find a bigger one, I will move to another one. In fact, the house business in Kingshan City has been very good in recent years. If you want to sell a good house on the same day, you can get the title deed in the afternoon. It took a lot of help to vacate the place next door. I can't find another place for the time being, so I can only see how it goes. Fuji Ui echoed with great difficulty. Master and Aya's opinion is my opinion. Li Ju added, it just so happens that I have something to contemplate in seclusion these days, so I may not be able to take care of the affairs outside, and I will have to rely on Mingsh to take care of it. Mingsh is a scholar, and his knowledge of economic affairs is limited. This time, there is a new job to manage the local livestock and insect industry, which Mingsh is not very good at. It is a small matter if the job is messed up, but it is a big matter to make the county magistrate unhappy. I think I need an old man who is familiar with the industry to help out. As the saying goes, father and son fight together in battle. Brother Fu, why don't you help your own child? At this point, for the sake of emotion, reason and the face of the child, Fu's father and mother had to stay. Because the 2 families lived close, Li Ju asked the servants and guards brought back by UAI to live in Li Garden, free of charge, and to help watch the door. Li Ju really had to retreat these days, and couldn't take care of the affairs outside. He was also worrying about where to find another group of strong men to look after the house, and this happened by chance. Chapter 238, Waiting for a long time. Fuji Ui and his wife put the boxes and cages in order and went to visit their relatives twice. They had established good relationships and seemed to be taking root. Li Ju felt that everything was ready, so he said that he would retreat to comprehend the notes left by his elders. Because he was comprehending weapons this time, he was afraid of hurting people. Li Ju chose a specially reinforced house in the school as the place for his meditation, and asked the upright gentleman Yufu to guard it, and not let anyone get close. Yufu was the most honest and trustworthy. Since he promised to guard the door, and not let anyone in, He would never break his promise. It was not the first or second time that Li Ju flipped through books and notes to find the good things recorded by his ancestors. Everyone was just surprised that he wanted to go outside to retreat this time, but they didn't think it was inappropriate. Yaoniang, Sanjiu, and Yaoniang, who were closer to the school, helped to put clothes and other daily necessities in the small building, and also arranged the coal stove for cooking, and put the honeycomb coal into the warehouse. Li Ju said, "The things I want to comprehend this time cannot be exposed to open flames. Dry food and clean water are enough. No stoves or other things are allowed in. Gold, silver, copper, iron, tin and other gold objects are also not allowed to be near. Otherwise if something unexpected happens, I'm afraid I will be either dead or injured." Yaoniang and others had to move all the things Li Ju set out, leaving only a few empty rooms. Li Ju looked through them and was satisfied. He locked the doors and windows and announced to the outside world that he was in seclusion. At night, Qingshan City imposed a curfew. The school was originally outside the city gate because there were many scholars, doctors, Confucian scholars, and teachers living inside, and the soldiers guarding the city took the comfort given by Li Yuan privately, so they could not help but take better care of it. It was late at night, at the beginning of the month. The crescent moon was crescent, the stars were shining, and everything was quiet and dark. Only torches were lit on the city walls, but they could only illuminate a few feet away. There were also a few faint lights in the school, which were from studious students studying at night. If the lights moved, it was probably because the students were hungry in the middle of the night and went to the cafeteria to find food. The soldiers guarding the city occasionally went to the cafeteria of the school to eat, which was common and did not seem unusual. Li Ju, who claimed to be in seclusion, had already climbed out of the school in the dark, crossed the river quietly, and arrived at the border of the barren mountain. Li Ju spent several days putting together a set of combat uniforms that were convenient for stealth, one for day and one for night. Everything from helmets to marching boots was included, and all the necessary tools such as compasses and infrared mirrors were available. On the outside, he wore an exoskeleton that helped him climb and carry weights. In his marching bag, there were weapons, medicines, food, drinking water, sleeping bags, inflatable rafts, and backup energy sources. The total weight was 20 kilograms, which was as light as a feather under the effect of the exoskeleton. Even without equipment, with Li Ju's physical fitness, it would be easy to climb out of the city gate, and he had gathered such equipment. Li Ju landed lightly on the experimental field on the barren mountain along the bridge on the dam. There were quite a few dogs guarding the house on the barren mountain, all of which were raised by Li Ju. They could tell from the smell and footsteps that their masters were coming, so they all shook their heads and wagged their tails and rubbed against each other to have fun. Quietly gathered in a group, not hearing a sound, and never disturbing anyone. Li Ju scattered a handful of modern dog snacks he brought with him to them, and the guard dogs hummed and moaned, like little pigs looking for food, leaving a way for Li Ju. Li Ju waved the compass and headed southeast to Yu County at night. Li Ju deliberately went around the barren mountain, and chose another longer road, to go down the mountain. This is the north slope of the mountain. Li Ju had visited the barren mountain once before buying it, and he knew the terrain of this area very well. The sunlight on the north slope is not good, and the crops are poor. In the past 2 years, there were very poor people who raised some wilted vegetables. In the past 2 years, there are almost no people, which is just right for him to do some business in the dark. Li Ju saw that there was no one around, and was about to take out his modified motorcycle from his portable warehouse, but suddenly waved his hand. Who's there? He was on a mountain path, full of moss and weeds, about 3 meters away from the slightly wider yellow mud road, where horses could run, and there was a bush in the middle. It was pitch black, not even the sound of birds singing, only a few insects chirping, so quiet that it made one's scalp numb. It seemed that there was no one else, but the heat sensor had sounded an alarm, and there was a human-shaped heat source nearby. Li Ju touched the dagger at his waist with one hand, put on the infrared goggles with the other hand, walked forward a few steps, and his sight passed through the branches of the bushes, and fell on an obvious heat source in the middle of the road. The man was very big, and raised his hands high, a standard surrender and harmless gesture. He couldn't see Li Ju's direction, so he turned back and forth on the spot to signal. Li Ju initially thought that this was also a time traveler who was familiar with international customary gestures, and a flash of surprise flashed in his mind, but he soon realized who this was. Ada? Is it you? Yes, this man was the mute. Li Ju pushed up the goggles, jumped to the side of the road in 3 or 2 steps, and turned on the searchlight. A tall man wearing a brown robe, and tied his hair tightly on the side of the road. Who else could he be, if not a mute? The mute was dodging because of the searchlight, but he still closed his eyes and gestured to convey his meaning to Li Ju. Let's go together. Let's go together. Li Ju pulled him to squat on the side of the road, gave him a branch, and asked him to write on the sand to answer, and asked, do you know what I'm going to do? The mute nodded. Kill people. Kill Chen Zhangao. Li Ju couldn't help but look at him with admiration. Although he did not deliberately conceal his plan, he dared to guarantee that his preparations and inquiries in these days were all within the normal range, and there was absolutely no hint or disclosure of the plan. The mute actually guessed it. You can guess what I'm going to do, and guess that I will set out today, and guess that I will take this road. The mute continued to nod, flattened the previous sentence, and wrote 3 lines on the ground. Master, redress the grievances of the poor. Master, today, it's abnormal. Master, I have been here. I try my luck. Li Ju was really impressed by him. How could he come across this? There are so many roads out of the city. How could he just choose the same one? The mute continued to write. Together. Li Ju squatted for a while, very much suspecting that besides the mute, someone else had guessed his plan. However, it doesn't matter, others have no evidence. In fact, more than one person guessed that Li Ju would take action. When the mute knew that Yu County magistrate intended to shield the murderer who massacred the village, he guessed that Li Ju would most likely solve it himself, based on his personality. Not only did he think of it, but County Magistrate Wu also thought of it. Huang Zhi and the others didn't quite understand the angry side of Li Ju, and they were still wondering why Li Ju only sneered a few times this time, grabbing the case file and asking questions non-stop. But County Magistrate Wu and the mute, who had seen Li Ju's anger, guessed that Li Ju would definitely take action. Even County Magistrate Wu violated the law and leaked the details of the case to Li Ju, hoping that Li Ju could uphold justice on his behalf. County Magistrate Wu hoped that someone could do what he couldn't do himself. It's not that Magistrate Wu hates evil and is upright. If he is an upright official like Magistrate Wang, he will never give Li Ju an easy way. He must be a flexible person to act like this. In fact, the grain merchant in Yu County used cruel means and violated the laws of the court. He should be executed according to the law. It's just that Magistrate Wu protected him, so the law could not be enforced. Magistrate Wu did not think there was anything wrong with enforcing the law across counties. In his own opinion, he was still upholding the laws of the court. Now he only hated that he was a scholar. If he knew martial arts, he would have followed Li Ju. Chapter 239 Yu County. In addition to the mutant Magistrate Wu, Sanjiu also guessed something from Li Ju's daily behavior, but she was used to being cautious in her words and deeds, and it was inconvenient for a woman to move around, so she just stayed to cover for Li Ju, so she didn't follow. So the mute continued to write on the ground. Sister Zhao knows, Sister Zhao covers, Sister Zhao helps me. I said, even if you guessed it, you would never be able to follow so quietly without help. Li Ju was willing to say a few more words, because Sanjiu was involved, so it was not good to say anything, so he just asked, since you are here, what should we do with the warehouse? The mute wrote, Sister Zhao said, I will pick up the goods, and the doors and windows will be sealed with cement. It was really done very carefully. Li Ju was convinced. In that case, come with me. It's no problem for me to take 2 people with me. It's not that Li Ju didn't want to send the mute back, but he was playing with the time difference. That is, to use the time difference as an alibi. It would take a whole day to send the mute back and forth, which would affect the plan, so it would be better to bring this helper. Li Ju took out a low-noise military motorcycle from the modern dimension, let the mute sit in the truck bed, threw him a helmet, and asked him to fasten his seatbelt. After several generations of improvements, there are many versions of the motorcycle. The fastest one has a speed of more than 150 kilometers per hour, but the noise is very loud, and one car can drive like 1,000 troops. There are also low noise motorcycles, but the speed is only between 80 and 100 kilometers per hour. Li Ju hesitated between the two types of cars, and finally took out the low noise car. The noise of the fast car will attract the attention of the ancients, although they will most likely regard it as a strange phenomenon from the sky. If the time of this strange phenomenon from the sky is too close to the time when he ran to trouble Chen Zhangjiao, it will easily arouse suspicion from others. In addition, given the current road conditions, no matter what kind of car it is, it has to be driven at a low speed, otherwise it is unknown how long the tires can last, and whether it will lose control and roll over. Li Ju didn't need to take risks. Even if the speed was 50 km per hour, it would be enough for him to get out of the time range of suspicion. The low noise vehicle, which has been updated and replaced countless times, is powered by electricity. It makes no sound when it turns. With a searchlight, it is very suitable for traveling late at night. The mute was also very nervous, worried that Li Ju would drive him back, until Li Ju conjured up a large two-wheeled vehicle with a cargo box, and gave him a strange hat to wear. He grinned and climbed into the cargo box nimbly. On the ancient Lois Road, an electric motorcycle sped past, and its far-sighted lights were extremely bright, like a meteor flying close to the ground. In ancient times, people were basically asleep late at night. Even if there were people who got up at night, or had something to do, there were only 3 or 5 people. They saw a flash of light, but they were just dazzled at the time, or there was some ghost fire burning. Along the way, the main road is only a quarter of the length, and the other 3/4 of the distance is a small road. The main road is directly rushed by motorcycle. The small road is narrow and rugged, not to mention motorcycles. Even off-road vehicles are not easy to use. There was no other way, so Li Ju had to get an exoskeleton for the mute. With the help of the exoskeleton, it was much faster to cross mountains and ridges. When they encountered those winding roads, such as going around a mountain stream or crossing a river, they could take a shortcut directly, which shortened a lot of distance. The two of them hid during the day and went out at night. According to normal walking speed, it took them 7 or 8 days to complete the journey in just 2 days. Yu County and Qingshan County are actually not far apart. The straight line distance is only 200 miles, but because the road is rugged and there are many mountain roads, the distance alone is more than 500 miles. This 500-mile road is not a flat road, so walking is even slower. They set off the night before, and the next night, Li Ju and the mute arrived at Dazhangshu village in Yu County. Here, Li Ju inspected the looted and massacred villages on the spot. Maybe they were sure that no one would make trouble, and no one dared to report it. The murderer just set fire and ran away, and even covered up the traces. Li Ju found some details mentioned by Yuasan in the ruins of the village, especially some buried or hidden bones, which proved that what Yuasan said was true. He did come back here and did some cleaning. After so long, the bodies in the village have rotted. Yuasan was alone, and he had to flee with 2 fellow villagers. He had no time and energy to bury all the bodies. More than 100 people in the small village lay there for nearly a month in this autumn, and their bones had rotted to the point of being exposed. The whole village was filled with an extremely disgusting stench of corpses. Even Li Ju couldn't help but feel nauseous when he approached. The mute wrote on the ground, "Shall I bury them?" Li Ju waved his hand. "Let the Chen family bury them. They have done something wrong, and they should redeem themselves." Li Ju injured the pungent stench and checked it out. He determined that the deceased included men, women, young and old, and the population structure was similar to that of a natural village. The possibility of other identities being disguised was extremely low. This was a solid hammer. The only thing left was to figure out whether it was Chen Zhangjiao's own idea or whether he was framed. That night they traveled all night to the county seat of Yu County and still spent the night in the woods outside the city. In the early morning of the next day, the two changed into the clothes of wealthy businessmen and entered the city openly. They disguised themselves as traveling merchants. Li Ju spoke with a Jiahu accent, and it was difficult for ordinary people to tell that he was not from Huajia County. In order to disguise themselves well, they also hired several local hangers on to carry the loads, which were filled with porcelain, furs and other northern and southern currencies that Li Ju temporarily transferred. The Yu people eat 2 meals a day. The first meal is eaten in the middle of the morning. When Li Ju arrived, the few breakfast stalls were still being prepared. Li Ju looked around and chose a grain steamed cake stall set up by an old couple. After ordering a few steamed cakes, Li Ju handed some to the mute. Second brother, take them and share them with everyone. I will ask the stall owner where to sell them. The mute went to Jinling to see a doctor for muteness last time. It was found that he was different from the common deaf mute disease. His hearing was intact, and the muteness was in his vocal cords. After a period of treatment, the mute still couldn't speak, but he could squeeze out very short and simple breath sounds. The mute knew that his muteness was the easiest to expose their identities. It was a good thing for him to pretend to be able to speak. Since there were outsiders, he would occasionally answer Li Ju's questions with some clear and short syllables. At this time, he squeezed out a no in response and took the steamed cake to the hanger-on. Everyone just thought he was naturally taciturn and didn't think much about it. Li Ju paid the money readily and then took advantage of the fact that no one was around to pull the old man aside and start chatting. You look strong and healthy. How old are you this year? Master, please tease me. I'm 62 years old. Your molars are still loose, right? You've taken good care of yourself. It seems that the climate and soil of you are also good for health. I've been traveling all over the country for so many years, and I've seen many old couples selling cakes, but not many are as upright as you two. TOEFL, TOEFL, how many cakes can you sell in a day at your stall? TOEFL, just enough to make a living, and not starve to death. For the time being, I'd rather farm at home. Farming is good, it's the long-term way. I heard that the price of rice in Jiangnan is 10 katis for 1 teal. Although it is pounded fine rice, the price is not low, right? The old stall owner said casually. How can it be this price? Ask around the street, who has seen anyone selling for less than 3 cents this year? Chapter 240, Ruffians. 3 cents for a pound of fine rice? This is only 3/10 of the official price. 1 mu of good land can only get about 80 pounds of fine rice. After working hard for a whole year, you can only get 3 teals of silver. After paying taxes and rent, there are only 7 or 8 cents left. How can farmers survive? Other places give at least 5 or 6 cents. Why here? It's still grain. The old stall owner didn't finish his words. His wife interrupted him nervously. He slapped his mouth and didn't dare to continue. There were quite a lot of people coming and going nearby. If he said too much, he might lose his life. Li Ju didn't care. Even if he tried to get information from Chen Zhangaya about murder, he probably couldn't get it out. The local grain price was a pleasant surprise. And seeing the 2 old men were so silent, they must have been threatened. Li Ju gave the old man an extra half a coin to calm him down. The old man took the money and his face looked much better. This guest was either rich or noble. It was rare that he didn't show a displeasure to them, the little people. At least it made people feel comfortable and willing to talk. Li Ju also asked where it was good to ship goods, where there were stores, etc. He asked all the topics that a businessman was concerned about. The female stall owner was also very happy when she saw the money. She pointed out the local businesses, markets, and market days one by one, and kindly reminded, there are few rich people in our county, and most of them buy things from fur traders. If you bring a lot of things, it will be hard to sell them. Li Ju said, they are just some leftovers. I will sell them at a discounted price today. If I can't sell them, there is nothing I can do. I will take them back and give them away tomorrow morning. I have been doing business since Jiahu for a few years, and I miss home very much. What do the educated people say? It's called homesickness. Yes, that's the word. The female stall owner agreed again and again. No wonder I felt that you looked unfamiliar, sir. It turns out that you went out to make a fortune. You young people are still good. You can leave as soon as you say. The old man and I want to leave, but we don't have the arms and legs. The old man hummed, wanting to mutter something, but not muttering it out. Li Ju added a handful of money and then asked his helpers to find a family near the local area to stay overnight. Time was tight. He had to finish everything today, and he had to leave Jiahu tomorrow morning. Funayang's experience made Li Ju unable to let go of the village called Laoangaranjahu. An adult woman who could bring glory to the village suffered an atrocity that was difficult to describe in words. What about other people? Other children and women, even the elderly? Li Ju knew that these things were inevitable in ancient times. The scarcity of survival resources meant that people had to make some moral compromises if they wanted to survive. This kind of morality certainly did not refer to morality based on the modern sense, but to morality in the ancient category. In short, there must be something of the same nature happening. Without knowing exactly where the incident happened, Li Ju could still pretend to be powerless. But there was such a thing happening near him, so he couldn't continue to pretend. From childhood to adulthood, Li Ju was educated to protect the people and the dignity and honor of the country. Knowing that someone might be bullied, Li Ju could not sit still. During the day, Li Ju asked the mute to guard the house, while he went out to sell the porcelain and furs, and continued to inquire about the news while selling things. At dusk, Li Ju, who had not sold much all day, planned to sell all the remaining things to local merchants at a low price. They were really ruthless in lowering the price, estimated to be only a quarter of the actual price, and the shopkeeper threatened that, if he did not sell to them, other stores would certainly not accept it. Li Ju deliberately took a look at the store, and there was no doubt that the surname was Chen. After leaving the store, Li Ju gave all these small groceries to ordinary people nearby, and finally there was a sheepskin mattress left. This mattress was made of scraps, and it was very warm, but it was a bit ugly. Li Ju decided to give this mattress to the old couple, who sold steamed cakes. It was almost late autumn, and the two old people were still wearing thin linen shirts and skirts full of patches, and they were in need of something to keep warm. Li Ju was holding the last piece of mattress as he walked towards the rental house. On the way, he happened to pass by a steamed cake stand, which really made him furious. He saw a few ruffians beating up the old couple. The old stall owner held a handful of money and refused to let go, and his hands were trampled bloody by the hooligans. The old wife protected her husband and kowtowed to the gangsters for mercy. She did not dare to stop even when her head was bleeding. She begged them to show mercy. "Masters, we only earn these few dollars from setting up the stall all day. After paying the protection fee, we only have this little left. Please be kind." The gangsters were unmoved and still kept trying to get the money from the old man's hands. They said, "What protection fee? We have never seen it. Since you have paid the protection fee to that family, why don't you give it to us? That's right, aren't we working hard? You said bad things about the boss to others today. If we hadn't pleaded for you, you would have been beaten to death and thrown to feed the fish. How can you not know what is good for you when we ask for a few dollars? Bah. Poor guy, we don't even care about this. Your grandfather's efforts are in vain." Li Ju originally thought it was better to mind his own business and try not to attract other people's attention. Besides, he could save today but not tomorrow. Offending these hooligans might make them vent their anger on ordinary people. However, looking at the old stall owner's hand, the hole on his wife's forehead, and the blood mixed with mud that stained a large area of his clothes and the ground red, Li Ju couldn't bear it. He turned the mattress in another direction, deliberately took out a bulging purse, and put it on his waist, and walked forward swaggeringly. Sure enough, several evil young men noticed the purse on Li Ju's body, and seeing that he was alone, they left the old couple, and came to trouble Li Ju. Their leader deliberately bumped into Li Ju, and then pushed Li Ju's shoulder without any hesitation, saying, "You bastard, you bumped into me, pay me." This was their initiative to provoke, but it was not Li Ju who wanted to make trouble. Li Ju kicked the nearest person 3 feet away without saying a word, and he hit a stone on the street and immediately stopped moving. Before the other party could react, Li Ju had already raised his sword to chop horizontally and vertically. The knife was not unsheathed, but just the sheath was enough to deal with these thugs who could only attack the old, weak and sick. Li Ju was ruthless, and those who could be disabled would not only be injured, but at least their legs would be broken. The leader who fainted directly was the happiest, because he did not have to wail while awake. Li Ju wrapped the bag in sheepskin and threw it to the old couple. "Don't tell anyone, or I will kill you. Get out." Being a little fierce is the way to protect them. Li Ju did not look at the stall owner and his wife again, but walked to the leader of the evil young man. touched his carotid artery, confirmed that he was still alive, and dragged him away by the collar. He had been trying to get information today, but it was scattered, some true and some false. He was worried that he almost had decisive evidence. It would be a pity to leave such a living person unanswered. It would be better to take him away for interrogation, so as to know what other monsters there are in this county besides Chenzangayao. Chapter 241, Heavenly Punishment. Li Ju beat the young ruffian half to death, and got all the details of the merchants in Yu County out of him. And it happened that this ruffian was also a thug of the Chen family. He personally participated in the massacre in Hangshu village, and knew the cause and effect clearly. With a little trick from Li Ju, he told everything. He kidnapped and raped women, seized property, and lent money at high interest rates. He would kill and burn anyone who disobeyed him. Compared with this one, the landlord Wu, that Li Ju dealt with in his early years at least had to use the title of dog funeral, which was considered merciful, but this one didn't even give him the title. The ruffian's confession basically matched the information Li Ju had inquired during the day, and the details of the arson of the village also matched Yu Yaoniang's accusation. It can basically be considered to be true, and not a frame up by others. The thug cried bitterly. I really don't know anything else. I even told him that I stole his concubine. Because the thug even confessed his own affairs, Li Ju was sure that he had confessed everything, and knocked him unconscious with another stick. The mute made a kill gesture, and Li Ju shook his head. We don't need to do it. Don't worry, I'm not mad yet. There's no need to kill for such a thing. Having said that, how to deal with this dog thing is very tricky. Li Ju walked around the house twice, asked the mute to break his limbs, wrote the main crimes on paper, and stuck them on his body, and quietly threw them to the door of the victim of the Chen family at night, and let the victim decide what to do. After dealing with the thug, Li Ju turned around and went to the houses of several grain merchants. From the confession of the thug, we can know that the local grain merchants and big households are basically the same kind of people. The difference is just the severity of their actions when they kill people. Chenzangaya would often commit murders of entire families. A slightly better Zhao who would know when to stop and just rob the family property and be done with it without killing people or torturing them for fun. As for raising prices, suppressing food prices, plundering the poor, lending money, etc., he was no different. Time was tight, and Li Ju had no time to do the details, so he unified the operation by knocking out the guards, handing them over to a mute to gag them, tying them up, and locking them up, finding the master of the house, tying up the old, weak, women and children, and locking them in the house, breaking the hands and feet of adult men and the master of the house, and listing the crimes, and asking the master to sign and confess, burning all kinds of loan notes, IOUs, house deeds, etc., and demolishing the granaries, warehouses, and house gates, hanging a mysterious article at the main door, pretending to be a demon, accusing them of unreasonable behavior in the name of demons, gods, and demons, so that the will of heaven is angry and punishing them, ordering those whose homes and properties were destroyed to take back their properties, and the families of innocent people who were killed can go to the newspaper to sue, etc. In one night, Li Ju killed 4 families and killed a total of 3 people, namely Chenzangayao, who killed people and slaughtered the village, the main culprit who led the killings, that is, the gangster leader Scarlang, and the money bank owner Jin Qianwen, who colluded with Chenzangayao and also preyed on the people in the village. Li Ju used high voltage electric shock, which killed people in one blow, and the effect was very much like divine punishment. Even with the help of the mute, Li Ju was busy until the dawn. Before he could barely complete the initial plan, he threw all the main culprits and the main lackeys into the street, and finally went to the county government office, and placed some of the account books in the court of the county government office. If the county magistrate does not resign himself, then more evidence of his collusion with grain merchants and wealthy people to bully the people, and take bribes, and pervert the law will appear in the government office of the county governor and even the governor. If the county governor and the governor cannot punish him, there is still divine punishment. After finishing these things, Li Ju and the mute went back to the room and slept soundly. They slept until noon, when they were awakened by a faint noise. After a quick wash, Li Ju asked the mute to boil a pot of water and fill it up to quench his thirst, and then he went out to find the master to settle the bill. The master was not at home, leaving only an old man with demisite to guard the house. Li Ju paid all the copper coins and wanted to ask a few more questions. The old man's speech was not very clear and his language was ambiguous. Li Ju listened for a long time, but could not understand, so he had to give up. It was still early. It might only take them half a day to cross the mountains and wilderness to Jiahu County, so they could set off today. So Li Ju took the mute to the market to buy dry food and take a look at the situation in the city. As soon as he went out of the door, before he stepped out of the alley, he heard the faint sound of firecrackers not far away. The gunpowder effect was not very good these days, and ordinary people could not afford it. Except for festivals, few people set off fireworks and firecrackers. The firecrackers used by most people were really roasted bamboo, which made a small sound and could not be transmitted far. But on this day, which was not a festival or a harvest day, the sound of firecrackers was everywhere in Yu County. Li Ju and the mute were halfway there when they saw many people passing by. A few young and middle-aged people were supporting a lame aunt, who happened to be saying, "Yes, yes, it's true. The old dog Chen who killed our father 2 years ago was struck to death by lightning. It was done by the gods. The gods also let us complain about grievances and avenge our grievances. The girl he robbed from our family is finally back." Li Ju paused and grabbed a passerby who was greeting others enthusiastically. "Brother, what's going on in this city?" The passerby that Li Ju grabbed was obviously a spectator who had eaten the melon thoroughly. He chatted on the spot in a concise, vivid and exaggerated manner to describe what happened last night. God sent heavenly soldiers to kill the 3 evils of you. And he also made public their crimes. Who among us hasn't been eaten by his lackeys? Even I have been bullied by them. That year, when I was visiting relatives and passed by his vegetable garden, his family accused me of stealing vegetables and extorted $100 from me before letting me go. Otherwise they would beat me to death. And the Xiaohua family we just passed, his daughter gave birth to 2 sons as her first child, and Chen Liagao saw that she could give birth and raise children, so he insisted on taking her home to be a maid for his sons. The daughters-in-laws refused, so Chen Liagao beat the daughter's parents-in-law and husband to death. The 2 sons were still breastfeeding and fell to the ground and died. The daughter went crazy at the time, but they didn't let her go, even though she was crazy, and they also carried her home. I heard that the daughter gave birth to a son last year, and both mother and son died. Everyone was afraid that her mother couldn't bear it, so they didn't tell her mother. Now, her mother is still thinking about taking the daughter back. What a sin. Why didn't God kill him earlier? At this time, there was already a circle of people around them, and they couldn't help but join the discussion after hearing what they said. Didn't he set the fire in Dashangshu village last month? I was thinking of going to Kingshan to sell grain, but seeing what happened to Liao Yu and the others, who would dare to go? Liao Yu is just unable to adapt himself and cannot do anything. Liao Yu has no choice. Liao Gaochen only gave him 3 cents and his village can hardly survive. Without the fire, they won't live to see the next year. Liao Gaochen saw that his village was in a good location and wanted to take it over to build a farm and collect tolls. Isn't it because he thinks he is an eyesore? Even if this didn't happen, their village wouldn't survive for a few days. And there is also old Liu from Xiaodawa village. When it was time to pay the rent, he didn't pay the full amount, so he forced his maid to pay the debt. Old Liu was so angry that he quarreled for a few words and was beaten to death at the entrance of the granary. He also said that he deserved to be beaten to death for resisting the rent. What rent was he resisting? The official only kicked the tip of the stick. At least he was left alive. They are better. They can kick down 3 buckets of millet from 1 stone. We don't even have enough for 3 buckets of food. Will you let us live? There was a maid in his family. When she was washing the master's feet, the water was a little hot, and she was kicked half to death. She was stripped naked and knelt on the stone slab in the cold winter, and she died after 1 night. This man is full of evil. He really deserves to be killed. But your government really doesn't care. Why should we care? There is no way to care. Great-grandfather uses him as a tribute every year. If you want to care again, I'm afraid you will lose your life. Chapter 242, Duananping Village. When Li Ju had inquired about the news before, everyone was still hesitant and did not dare to say too much, so what Li Ju knew was just the tip of the iceberg. Now that the villain was dead, everyone was really as jubilant as if it was the new year. Every household set off firecrackers and fireworks and dared to gather together to accuse the sufferings of these years, so they turned over the old stories one by one. After listening for a while, Li Ju knew about 4 or 5 cases of extermination. At that time, he only regretted that he was not too gentle last night, but there was no time to do anything else at this time, so he could only leave with hatred. The county magistrate of Yu County was half dead when he woke up because of the evidence account book placed in the lobby. When he heard that Chen Zhangao, Bei Lang, and Jin Qianwen were all killed by lightning, he was so scared that he fainted. After waking up again, the county magistrate made up excuses and symbolically sent a county magistrate to investigate the case. At the same time, he wrote a letter to his superior, the county governor, to report the matter, and he was really ready to resign. He has saved hundreds of thousands of taels of silver over the years, and he will have no worries about food and drink for the rest of his life. He can't be thrown into jail for shielding others. Soon, the county magistrate really couldn't find out any problems. Of course, it is also possible that he didn't want to find out clearly. In short, this major case of 3 deaths and stolen property was handled according to the theory of gods and ghosts. Even a martial arts expert would find it difficult to kidnap so many people quietly, not to mention that the cause of death of the 3 deceased was lightning strike, which is very metaphysical and has become the biggest evidence of the theory of ghosts and gods. Before the case was closed, the magistrate of Yu County had claimed to be ill for a long time and had not handled official business. After a few days, he successfully resigned from his post and left quietly on the same day, leaving the people of Yu County waiting for the new county magistrate to take office in anxiety. This is a later story. At this moment, Li Ju has rushed into the mountains and forests with the mute. The straight line distance from the county seat of Yu County to Jiahu is not far, only about 40 or 50 miles. But there were continuous hills in the middle, and the road was sometimes there and sometimes not. Even if there was a part, it was 3 roads and 18 bends. 1 mile away, the road was 3 miles long. Li Ju and the mute used modern tools to take a shortcut. In addition to the exoskeleton, they also had a temporary steel structure for building a bridge and an inflatable raft for drifting across the river. They really walked in a straight line for the distance of 40 or 50 miles. The continuous hills also blocked the possible leakage of information. Occasionally, there would be a few scattered natives in the middle. They were all descendants of refugees from unknown dynasties and generations who did not speak the language. Even the well-informed city dwellers could not figure out Li Ju's equipment and dress, let alone the natives. It was even more difficult to understand, let alone tell others. Li Ju spent an afternoon in such a swagger and came to Duananping, a village under Jiahu Lake. Duananping's name comes from the local dialect of the natives. Like Mengshu village, 9 out of 10 people died during the war. Most of the current population migrated later. The concept of blood clan was gradually formed through intermarriage between 2 generations about 10 years ago. It is common for clans to compete for resources and help each other. After competing for resources within the same clan, they must make certain distributions according to the established rules, and on the basis of the distribution system, blood relationship and stable order, a contradictory unity of interests is generated, which devours each other, and is united against the outside world. Fu Niang felt that her chastity memorial arch could protect herself at that time, precisely because there was a custom of mutual help among the same clan in Jiangnan, and she had seen and understood this operating order. However, Fu Niang did not expect that this village, which had not yet completed its integration, did not give birth to the unity of interests she was familiar with. They were still in the stage of devouring each other, and were far from entering the time of unanimous externalization. Therefore, her chastity memorial arch, a treasure of the town clan, that could be used as a protective umbrella in other villages, was not cared about by anyone in Duananping. People were more interested in the opportunity to pull out a wild vegetable from her family's field. Duananping now does not seem to be much different from 10 years ago. Li Ju did not enter the village to stay overnight this time, but landed in the mountains and forests. They did not plan to stay overnight here, so there was no need to stay overnight. As for the situation you want to confirm, it is enough to see it with your eyes. Although the population in the village is large, the traffic is simple, and the doors are off, and you can see the end at a glance. Compared with the villages in Qingshan County, Duananping is much more backward and poor. The houses are short and dilapidated, the fields are scattered and irregular, the people are ragged, and have no energy, and basically no women are seen, not to mention women and girls, even old women are rare. That's fine. Li Ju saw with his own eyes that a family took an old man who was obviously still alive up the mountain at dusk, and the old man did not come down with them when they went down the mountain. Obviously, for the elderly who were unable to support them, they chose to abandon them directly. Abandoning the elderly and abandoning babies were once the customs of the place, and Li Ju had heard a little about it. Li Ju couldn't bear it, so after the people left, he groped to the place they had just gone to. It was about 4 or 5 miles away, and he arrived at a cliff. The cliff was not high, but there were hard rocks underneath, without any buffer, and it didn't look like it was formed naturally. If people fell from here, they would most likely die. There were corpses everywhere on the cliffs. Some were already skeletons, some were just beginning to rot, and there was a body lying dead at the bottom of the cliff, which was obviously dead not long ago. Li Ju guessed that this was the old man who had just been carried up the mountain. These corpses were stacked layer by layer, and the faint phosphorescent lights flickered. The mute squeezed out a low and hoarse sigh like a crow from his throat. Li Ju asked him, "Do you know this custom?" The mute nodded. Li Ju pulled him away from here and came to a valley a little further away. He turned on the light and gave the mute a stack of paper. Li Ju asked, and the mute wrote, "There is indeed a custom of abandoning the elderly, baby girls, and sick children in Jiangnan. However, with the establishment of the Great Yang Kingdom, people's livelihood has recovered slightly, and propriety, righteousness, integrity, and shame have played their due role again, at least in Qingshan County. It is also true that only in an era of extreme scarcity of survival resources will there be such a custom. Who doesn't want to support their family if they can? Even a daughter who is disliked by others will be kept as a resource for exchanging money. As for the age at which the elderly are abandoned, there is generally no fixed number. Those who are a little more affluent will set it at 60 or 70, while those in tight places will set it shortly after losing their labor force. The same is true for seriously ill and disabled people. Li Ju thought of the fact that there were very few people of middle age in the village he had just observed, and he probably guessed that Duananping was the kind of place where the coefficient of survival was the highest. According to the comparison of Fu Niang's oral account, it is even worse now than when she was in such a place with mountains, rivers, and countryside. Life is getting worse and worse, which is amazing. After the mute wrote down what he knew, he waited quietly for Li Ju to tell him what to do next. While waiting for him, he collected all the papers so that they could be used as kindling in the future. Chapter 243, The Demise of a Village. Li Ju walked a few steps on the cliff where the old and the infant were abandoned, and finally decided to catch someone to ask. Li Ju found 2 masks and put them on himself and the mute, then returned to the village, picked up a farmer who had just rested, and brought him to the edge of the cliff, pretended to be a ghost and threatened him, and took out all kinds of things in the village from his mouth. Li Ju did not point out Fu Niang directly, but used their bullying of the weak as an excuse, pretending that he was ordered to punish them. Such a scare really scared the man to say everything. The village is getting poorer every year. It is said that only the elderly over 60 will be abandoned, but in fact, not many people can live to 40 years old. On the one hand, everyone can't afford to raise a daughter, and on the other hand, boys can't get married when they grow up. At first, the few women left in the village suffered. Gradually, only a few families could gather a few liters of rice to buy women from outside. Later, they couldn't buy them anymore, and the strong laborers all went to the town. As for the bullying of widows more than 10 years ago, he no longer knew about it. Those who knew about it were dead. After all, more than 10 years had passed, and the people at that time were in their 30s or 40s. However, those who could live to the age of 40 in the village were almost all dead. The remaining people never mentioned such things, and they didn't seem to be people who could do such things. Now there are only 13 families left in the village, more than 20 fewer than back then. Most of them died because the head of the family died and the family was extinct. A few went out to escape famine and never came back. There were only 3 women left in the whole village, one of whom was Yu, a 6-year-old child bride who was stolen from a human trafficker in the market when he went to the market, and 2 extremely brave sisters-in-law in their 30s. Yu had only been stolen a few days ago, and the eldest sister-in-law was extremely fierce. If not for this, the 2 of them would not have survived. Li Ju sneered, knocked the man unconscious, and threw him on the spot, then searched every house, and found the little girl tied up with ropes in a broken stone house. Without saying anything, Li Ju found a big bag to put the little girl in, and left overnight. It's not that he didn't want to avenge Fu Niang, but the village was so dilapidated that Li Ju didn't know where to start. There was no money, but he had a life, and it wasn't the life of those rapists back then. As for whether the rescued girl wanted to stay, Li Ju didn't ask. Even if she was willing to stay, she would have to make the decision after she grew up. The girl might have suffered a lot of torture. Although she was abducted again, she didn't say a word. If it weren't for the slight breathing sound that proved that this was a living thing, Li Ju would probably still be worried about her life. Jiahu and Yu formed an isosceles triangle with Qingshan City. It took Li Ju 1 day and 2 nights to get from Qingshan City to Yu County. The return journey took another day because he brought a little girl who needed to eat and camp overnight, and the road from Jiahu to Qingshan was not like the road from Yu County, which had some wider dirt roads, so it took another day. Yu was ignorant. She was first abandoned by her parents when she was still in her cradle. After being picked up by her adoptive parents, she was raised and sold. She was sold by traffickers again, and finally stolen to Duananping. She had been tossed between traffickers since she was 4 years old. She could neither speak nor understand Mandarin. She didn't know how to cry out when she was hungry or when she was in pain. The 3 days she was carried in a bag by Li Ju were the first time in her life that she knew what peace was. Li Ju didn't expect this. He was not such a careful person. The mute was worse than Li Ju. Li Ju had raised Yu Yaoniang and Ziolan for 3 years, and Yu Yaoniang called him father. The mute was all alone until now. He couldn't raise a little girl, not even a half-grown boy. Anyway, when they ate, Yu also got a bowl of milk soaked in grains and a piece of ham. When they solved their personal problems, Yu also solved their personal problems. When they set up a tent to sleep, Yu also had a sleeping bag to sleep in. Ko would only be let out at nightfall and would be stuffed back into her pocket before dawn so that Ko would not know where she was. On the first night, Li Ju put up the tent and let Ko out to sleep. He was a little worried that Ko would run away. The road was full of deep mountains and old forests, and if Ko ran away, she would be in danger. However, after one night, Ko did not show any intention of running away. She liked the soft sleeping bag so much that she would even take the initiative to fold it up and hold it tightly, as if she was worried that Li Ju would abandon her. Then Li Ju really softened his heart. Another night, Li Ju and the mute returned to the school. Li Ju went directly back to the secluded room, while the mute pushed a cart from outside the city into the city. On the cart were special goods such as the Lee Garden Sparrow Bell, the colorful cloth, and Koa, which were designed to conceal her from the public. The gatekeepers of Qingshan City were already familiar with the mute. When they saw a skinny little girl sleeping in his car, they not only did not ask much, but also teased him. "Is this your wife? Maybe you went home to get married?" The mute was so scared that he shook his head repeatedly. In Lee Garden, having sexual thoughts about a girl under the age of 16 is a serious crime. At the very least, he will be expelled from Lee Garden, and at the worst, he will be sent to do hard labor. The gatekeeper was just joking. After checking that there were no holes in the goods, he let the mute into the city. The mute pushed Xiaokoa back to Lee Garden. On the other side, Li Ju was reviewing his whereabouts during this period. The hair on the window of the school building was still the same, proving that no one had come in during this period. So no matter what happened in Yu County in the future, Li Ju's alibi would be there anyway. The time spent on this journey was at least 10 days less than the time it takes for an ordinary person to walk. He used high voltage electricity to kill Chen Zhangaya and the other 3. This method could not be cracked in ancient times. He pretended to be from Jiahu in Yu County and used the Jiahu accent. He never showed his face in Jiahu, so it was impossible for anyone to suspect him. The only exception was Xiaokeoa. However, he tried to test Xiaokeoa on the way. Xiaokeo didn't understand what he said, and she might not even know that she had been trapped in Duanunping. Moreover, Xiaokeo had never seen the wild environment when there was light. Even if Xiaokeo learned to speak in the future, it would be difficult for her to understand what happened on the road in the past 2 days. Li Ju then pretended to have finished his retreat, swaggered out of the small building, said hello to Yufu, took the big black horses for a stroll, and went back to Li Garden. Since the two of them left Li Garden, Zhao Sanjiu's heart has been hanging, and she couldn't let it go. She was uneasy about everything she did. Yaoniang persuaded her to give up the work of music clothing store and Li Garden, and to take care of the door and the family with all her heart. She took over the miscellaneous work in Sanjiu's hands and did it. In the past 2 years, Yaoniang has become more mature. Seeing that she is doing a good job, Sanjiu really let Yaoniang take charge of music clothing store temporarily. She only took care of the affairs of Li Garden, fearing that there would be any mistakes. It was not until this morning, when the mute came back with the cart, that Sanjiu hurriedly chanted a few prayers to the Bodhisattva and came forward to help the mute pack up the things he brought back. Because there were many people in Li Garden, Sanjiu wanted to ask how Li Ju was and how things were going, but she couldn't ask, so she could only ask vaguely, "Did you get the things smoothly?" After the mute nodded to indicate that everything was going well, Sanjiu was slightly relieved. Then she noticed the dirty little grass that looked like a pile of tattered mattress, and her voice suddenly rose 8 feet high. "Who is this again? Did you steal the girl from outside?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244 Miscellaneous. The mute felt wronged. Why did everyone think that Xiaokeoa was a girl he bought or robbed? He knew the rules of Li Garden by heart and could even write them backwards. How could he make such a mistake? Sanjiu also realized that he had spoken out of turn and changed his words. "I think the girl you rescued is homeless now. I'll take her to settle down first." The mute nodded to indicate that Sanjiu was right. Sanjiu ignored the fact that Xiaokeoa was dirty and took Xiaokeoa to the public bathroom. The mute went to tidy up the warehouse. After tidying up the warehouse, Li Ju also returned to Li Garden. Yaoniang and others had received the news from the school early that Li Ju had come out of confinement, and they were waiting for Li Ju at the foot of the wall together with Chuzan, Shiba and others. When Li Ju dismounted and entered the door, Luo's father and son had already come up to lead the horse. Yaoniang and Wu Guanjia talked about family matters and the latest news outside respectively. Chuzan, Shiba and others could not get a word in, so they followed quietly. When Li Ju came out, after washing and changing clothes, the kitchen had already sent a table of his favorite food. Yaoniang was like a little bee, arranging plates and serving food. When she saw Li Ju coming out, she said, "First, I asked the kitchen to send it. It's none of the kitchen's business. The master has been gone for 5 or 6 days. Everyone must miss the master. Let us do our best." Li Ju rarely set up meals in his own residence. When he wanted to eat, he would go to the canteen with everyone on time. At most, he would set up a table in the small private room in the main hall when entertaining guests. Yaoniang acted on her own today, but she had a lot of reasons, and Li Ju couldn't bear to blame her. Li Ju was very hungry. He hadn't had a good sleep or a good meal in the past few days. He also consumed a lot of energy, which was very tiring. He urgently needed to replenish his energy. So Li Ju just said thank you, sat down, picked up the bowl, and ate in big mouthfuls. Yaoniang was not in a hurry to leave, so she sat on a small stool beside her and continued to chatter about Li Yuan's recent events. The serious matters were discussed by Wu Guanjie and Sanjiu, and Yaoniang's chatter was more like the lively chats of a family on weekdays. Li Ju did not feel annoyed, but felt that this was more like normal life. Halfway through the meal, Sanjiu came in angrily. When Sanjiu walked in, she looked up and saw Yaoniang standing aside while Li Ju was eating. She swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue and changed the topic to, "Just now, Ada brought back a little girl. Does the master know about it?" "Yes, I found her on the road and asked Ada to bring her back. Her original name seemed to be Zyoko. What's wrong with her? Is there something wrong with the girl?" Sanjiu hurriedly said, No, I just want to tell the master that I have packed up the girl and placed her with me to keep Zyrolan company. The girl is still young and looks like only 4 or 5 years old. We need to find an older sister or adoptive mother for her." Li Ju did not doubt him and said, "Let her choose one in a few days, and her share will naturally be kept by her adoptive mother or sister. But I would like to see if Fugia's mother and Zyoko are destined to be together." Sanjiu did not know what he meant, but seeing that Li Ju had already made up his mind, she did not meddle in other people's business. Because in front of Yaoniang, although he knew that Yaoniang would not betray Li Ju, after all, Li Ju's trip was to find someone to bring bad luck, Sanjiu did not want to let the young Yaoniang know about these things. Yaoniang looked at them with curious eyes and had no intention of leaving, so Sanjiu changed the topic and asked, "The master has been away for a few days and there is nothing to talk about at home. There are ready-made old rules. I think Uncle Wu and the others have talked about it. I won't say much. I just want to know how the master has comprehended." Li Ju remembered that the mute mentioned that Sanjiu also guessed his purpose and replied, "Don't worry, I have thought about everything I should think about, and I have done everything I should do, and I haven't done anything I shouldn't do. Instead, I should ask Engineer He and Engineer Tao to come and discuss building a greenhouse and preparing the ground film." Sanjiu nodded. "When the master finds a foster mother for Zyoko, please call me. Zyoko is very well behaved. I'm a little worried if I don't tell her future foster mother some things." Li Ju didn't hear any other meaning and agreed happily. After a meal and a short rest, all the things that had accumulated over the past few days and needed Li Ju's decision were sent to him from all over. There were visiting cards, favors, industries, agricultural capital, work, and schools. The guys who delivered cards and letters outside, and the team leaders of various industries inside, came one after another. Although Li Ju was only away for 6 days, it seemed like a lifetime of work. Sanjiu passed by several times, and there were many people queuing up on Li Ju's side waiting for instructions. Sanjiu had no choice but to delay it again and again, until Li Ju invited Father and Mother Fu to discuss things. Since knowing Mother Fu's past, Li Ju could roughly guess what the not in the Fu family was. In ancient times, women's chastity was taken very seriously. Even if the rapists of that year were dead, the pain and burden in Mother Fu's heart would not be reduced in the slightest. Li Ju did not mention what happened in the past, but just talked about Zyroko's situation. "The reason I asked Brother Fu and his wife to come here is not for anything else, but I have a difficult matter here, and I need their help." Father Fu just looked at Mother Fu, who smiled apologetically and said, "Master, that's not right. If you have any instructions, we will naturally do it. I'm just afraid that we are clumsy and can't do it well, which will cause you trouble. No one else is more suitable for this matter except you." Li Ju motioned to Sanjiu to bring the clean Zyoko over and held her in his lap with one hand. "This is the little orphan girl I bought from the human traffickers after I came out of seclusion. She is from Duanunping. I vaguely remember that it seems to be Brother Fu's hometown." Li Ju deliberately did not mention Fu Niang, but only mentioned Fu Dad. Fu Dad honestly said yes, and Li Ju continued, "I heard that there are only 13 families left in Duanunping now, with more than 20 people, and Zyoko is the only girl among them. It is like a dead village. No one in the whole village is older than 40. The elderly are almost all dead, and there are a few who are barely alive. Because there is no extra money in the family, and no wife or house, I'm afraid they will not live long, and have no descendants." Fu Niang was stunned at first, but then she came to her senses. What Li Ju meant by this was that those who bullied her more than 10 years ago and did not save her, those people are almost all dead, and even if there are still some alive, I don't know how many days they can live. A trace of pleasure suddenly appeared on her face, but it was immediately covered by a complicated expression. Seeing that she understood, Li Ju continued, I'm afraid she has done something wrong, and God cannot bear to see it, so who knows if he will punish the village. I only sympathize with such a small little girl. She has grown up to now, and I heard that she is 6 years old, but you see, she doesn't look like 6 years old at all. If she is 4 years old, some people will believe it. Moreover, she can neither understand Mandarin nor speak. She probably has not been taught by her parents since she was a child. This is very difficult. It is not appropriate for a grown man like me to take care of a half-grown girl. And the language barrier is also a big problem. Therefore, I thought that Brother Fu is from Duananping, so why not ask you two to take care of the little girl first, and make plans when she can speak and listen. Chapter 245. She is not wrong. Father and Mother Fu looked at the little girl on Li Ju's lap, only to see that the little girl was timidly clinging to Li Ju's arm, as if she was very scared. She looked pale and thin, but you could vaguely see some beauty between her eyebrows, and her black and bright pupils were watery, which was indeed lovable. Mother Fu said, since she is from Dalang's hometown, she is his niece, which means she is my relative, and I should help her. Let her be a companion to my daughter first, and I will take good care of her. Li Ju nodded and handed Xiaokeo's share book to Mother Fu. Although Xiaokeo is entrusted to you to take care of her, she is still a member of my family. Bring her all the share, 30 eggs, 1 pound of brown sugar, rice, flour, milk, vegetables, fruits, chicken, duck, fish and meat every month. There is a fixed amount, and someone will deliver them on time. In addition, I will give you 2 taels of silver every month as wages for taking care of the little girl. I hope Xiaokeo can grow up happily and healthily in the home of big brother and big sister-in-law. Fu Niang said, Master, that's not right. I don't want a penny of this salary. Koa is a relative. She has lost her parents and is living outside. We should raise her. This is the first reason. Master has helped our family so much. Dalang and I have been here. He has taken care of our food and work. We can never repay him even if we die. How can we repay him? By raising a little girl. This is the second reason. Master is also the mentor of our child and the matchmaker between him and his wife. Although he doesn't say it, we know that he also wants to be filial to him. It's really impossible to beg for it. I'm afraid that we have done our best and still can't help much. Li Ju smiled and said, it's not a favor. Your child is destined to do things for me for the rest of her life. Well, I'll leave Koa to you. Sanjiu, don't you have something to hand over to Sister Fu? Go ahead. Sanjiu had waited for this moment for a long time, and hurriedly stood up, bent down and picked up Xiaokeo, and replied, Hey, Master, wait for me. Sister Fu and I will be back soon. These are all private conversations between us women. Master can't stop. Father Fu was a man of few words, and Li Ju had nothing to say to him. After the 2 women left, there were only the 2 of them in the room, and it was terribly quiet for a while. After a long while, Father Fu seemed to have just found his voice. Master, did you go to Duananping? Li Ju didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. Father Fu took a half step back, and suddenly kowtowed to Li Ju with his hands and feet. Master, I won't say a word to anyone. She will never get over this hurdle in her life, and I will never forget the grievances she suffered in my life. I'm useless, unable to seek justice for her, and instead cause her and her son to suffer humiliation for the rest of their lives. Li Ju jumped down from the chair and lifted Father Fu up. No need to do this. I just can't stand seeing people being bullied. If it was someone else instead of Fuji Yui's mother who was hurt, I would still go. Besides, I didn't do anything this time, and they died on their own. It was really God's will. Father Fu shook his head. He took a long time to formulate those words just now, and he didn't know what he could say next. Just thinking of Fu Niang's suffering, and the contempt the family of 3 had suffered in Jiahu over the years, tears streamed down his face for a moment. Li Ju sighed, and patted his shoulder. Brother, why do you have to be so childish? Hurry up and wipe your tears. When your wife comes back later, she will think I bullied you." As soon as he finished speaking, Fu Niang and Sanjiu came. They also had slightly red eyes. Li Ju thought that Xiaokeo's miserable life resonated with them, so he didn't ask any more questions and stood up to say goodbye with Sanjiu. After Li Ju and Sanjiu left, Fu Niang cried to Fu Dai, "I thought I was the only one with such a miserable life, but I didn't expect that the girl sent by Master Li would have the same fate. She is only 6 years old. How could those people be so cruel to such a young girl? It would be better if they were really dead one day." Fu Dai comforted his wife, "It's okay now. She is still young. She will forget those things after spending a few days with our girl. As long as she forgets, she can live a good life. Master Li doesn't care, so how can others care for the master? You see, Miss Ao is a widow, but the master still gave her property. Missy on the mountain is an only child, and she is about to marry the county magistrate. I heard that Miss Yu was also promised to someone else and was bought by the master to be raised as a daughter. The master ignored her." Before Fu Dai finished speaking, the half-closed door was pushed open, and the person who broke in was Fu Xiaoguya. When Fu Shushan heard that Li Ju was back, he came to discuss a postal industry route and business planning with him, but he came up empty-handed. The maidservant who was with Yuai told Fu Shushing that Li Ju had sent a little girl to ask their family to take care of her, and also sent a share of the family. It was said that the little girl was a relative of Fu's father's hometown, etc. Fu Shushing's face turned pale at that time. His hometown, Duananping, had become his nightmare. Associated with the two words were those sharp curses, contemptuous ridicules, insults from classmates, and harshness from the tutor. He pushed the door open and asked, "Master knows. He knows that you remarried before you became a widow, and he also knows that you." Fu Shushan was very nervous. He still remembered to lower his voice and look at the situation outside while asking, to prevent others from hearing. Li Ju was one of the turning points in his life. If Yuai represented the direction of his family, then Li Ju represented the future of his career. Yuai chose to understand and care for him out of sympathy and love. But what about Li Ju? Fu Shushan didn't know. He felt that Li Ju was different from others, but he couldn't afford to gamble because he couldn't lose. Fu Shushan had studied in 4 or 5 schools and had listened to classes from no less than 10 teachers. Every teacher would mention him in a meaningful way when talking about the 3 bonds and 5 constant virtues of the ruler, minister, father, and son. Everyone. How could Fu Shushan dare to gamble his future to test Li Ju's attitude? Fu Niang's face was also pale. She had always hated herself for being a burden to her son, but if she didn't remarry, her son wouldn't even live to this age, let alone learn to read, study, become a teacher and get married. Fu Dad shrank subconsciously at first. His stepson was a scholar who had passed the imperial examination. His status was different from others. He and his wife had become a burden now. He was used to giving in. But today is different. Li Ju is an outsider, a top figure in Qingshan County, an official. Fu Dad is not clear about the difference between an honorary title and a real job, but he found a way to run 500 or 600 miles just to help Fu Niang get revenge. Li Ju doesn't think Fu Niang is wrong. He is Fu Niang's husband. How can he think Fu Niang is wrong? Yes, what did Fu Niang do wrong? People want to survive and raise their sons, so they are forced to become victims of that world. But what did this person do wrong? Fu Dad blocked Fu Niang behind him and took a step forward. Yes, the master knows. He looked at his stepson's face, which was getting paler and paler, even to the point of blue and black, and said solemnly, "The master not only did not look down on you and your mother, but the master also said that your mother was innocent, and the ones who were wrong were those scum in Duananping. Did you hear that? Your master said your mother was innocent. She did nothing wrong." Chapter 246 Greenhouse Line. Fu Shushan has been estranged from his parents over the years, but this estrangement does not mean that they have broken off their relationship or changed their family background. If Fu Shushan had this idea, he would not have mentioned his parents to Li Ju, let alone talked about family affairs to the Yu family. He himself couldn't figure out what he wanted. He blamed his mother and hated his fate because of what happened to his mother, but he couldn't let go of his parents. He still had to send the money he earned and the rice from the government to his family home. He didn't seem to have any feelings for the little girl his mother gave birth to after remarrying, but he actually loved and took care of her behind her back. His feelings have always been extremely contradictory until today when his stepfather said it all. He felt uncomfortable because he had indeed been subjected to ridicule from the whole world for many years, and he couldn't let go because he knew in his heart that it was not his mother's fault, but those who did evil, but he couldn't get justice for his mother. He hated others and himself, but the ridicule of others was justified, which made his hatred seem unfounded, and finally resulted in such a tangled and contradictory result. Dad Fu yelled she is not wrong, and angrily confronted his stepson for a while, and then his mind gradually calmed down. He is a butcher, but he yelled at Wen Wuxing. Dad Fu was scared. Wen Wuxing is a star from the sky, don't touch the thunder. But even if he was scared, he still stood between the mother and son, protecting his wife tightly. Fu Niang stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, and said, "The master knew about it, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he comforted us for a long time, and he even helped us find out the whereabouts of those bullies and hooligans, trying to help us vent our anger. The master is a really good man. Don't worry about anything else. The master won't tell anyone. You've suffered a lot these years, and I know that you've been wronged outside. But, there's nothing mother can do. If possible, who doesn't want to live a clean life? If there is a way out, why do you have to do this? I was lucky to escape that year. If it weren't for your Uncle Fu, I would have been a dead man long ago, and how could you be where you are today? We, mother and son, have such a hard life." After she finished speaking, Fu Shushan was overwhelmed with grief when he thought of the years, and he and his mother hugged each other and cried. Fu's father looked left and right, and finally hugged his two most important relatives, as if he accepted his fate. Li Ju naturally didn't know what happened later. He just felt strange. Fu Shushan always had a smiling expression in front of people and behind their backs. Why did he suddenly change to a crying face? However, the next day, Fu Shushan returned to a smiling face and traveled around the world. He was calm even when Mount Tay collapsed in front of him. Li Ju just thought he was a young man with young thoughts and didn't ask much. It was almost the middle of September. It was still warm during the day, but the autumn wind at night was getting colder day by day. Li Ju was busy installing a greenhouse for the comparison field. Large pieces of flat glass have not yet overcome the technical difficulties, but a lot of small pieces of glass have been produced. Glass is further divided into mirrors, utensils, flat plates and special glass. For craftsmen with experience in firing colored glass, changing the formula and shaping is not a problem. Large pieces of flat glass are the most difficult, followed by mirrors. The mirror needs to solve the silver plating technology. Once this technical difficulty is overcome, the current sky-high price of glass silver mirrors will instantly become affordable. Silver plating technology is simply the formula of silver plating solution and reducing solution. Li Ju could even copy out the molecular formula for them. However, Li Ju had no idea how to prepare this thing. He had to gather the core members of the Potters to take a basic chemistry course, hoping that they could combine their knowledge and the content of the chemistry course to get the silver plating solution. Flat glass technology has not made much progress in a short period of time. This thing is too challenging for the craftsman's skills and equipment. It can be made, but it does not meet Li Ju's requirements for low prices and large quantities, so he is still overcoming the difficulties of the production line. Large pieces of glass have now been prepared in rough versions, which require countless heat sources such as coal, and professional workers and heat-resistant extension and rolling equipment. The cost is too high. It is difficult to promote glass sheds on a large scale in a short period of time, but it is enough for effect testing. Carpenters customize glass frames and support frames according to the size of flat glass. In this way, a complete glass shed is erected in less than 3 days. Today's potters are still unable to produce flat glass of uniform size and thickness, so the spliced shed is composed of many irregular polygonal wooden frames. It is a down-to-earth agricultural greenhouse, but it also has the temperament of an artist. When the glass greenhouse was completed, many people from Kingshan County came to see the western scenery. They were amazed by this crystal clear house. praising it as the crystal palace of the Dragon King and the water curtain cave of Sun Wukong. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would believe that there would be such an exquisite house in the world? This house is not for living or appreciation, but for farming. They don't understand how this thing can extend the farming time of the land. In their naked eyes, the sun shines the same inside and outside the glass room. Even because the glass contains impurities and has a lower light transmittance, the sunlight in the greenhouse is not as dazzling as the sunlight outside. Why is the temperature in the greenhouse higher? People who have learned basic geography knowledge from Li Ju for a period of time can easily understand the principle. For sunlight, the indoor and outdoor glass sheds are indeed the same, but for the long-wave radiation generated by the ground heat source, it is very different. In the face of long-wave radiation, glass is like a thick wall, blocking the direction of radiation and playing a role in heat preservation. Without glass in the outdoor space, the heat energy of the long-wave radiation from the ground will dissipate. These Liuan people can easily accept the working principle of the greenhouse, which is in sharp contrast with those who have not learned the miscellaneous knowledge of Liuan. Many farmers who have been digging for food in the soil all their lives can understand it, but many scholars who have read books all their lives do not understand that some things have been slowly changing, but few people have noticed it. These few people who have discovered the changes have chosen to conceal it. At least, the things Li Ju is doing are currently to increase the harvest of crops and to feed more people. Every person struggling on the verge of starvation cares about it, and every official who is committed to making sure the people have enough food also cares about it. As for the things that come later, let's talk about it later. After the greenhouse was built, Li Ju put a thermometer in it so that he could know the indoor temperature at any time. If the temperature is too low, you need to light a fire to heat it up. If the temperature is too high, you need to open a few glass doors for ventilation. Without the experience of predecessors, people have to rely on themselves to explore. Li Ju selected several young people from the agricultural students in the school and brought some farmers from Li Garden who had completed the basic geography general education course to form a greenhouse task force. Li Ju gave them the task of mastering the applicable temperature of the greenhouse and forming a full-level manual with guiding significance. That is, anyone who gets the manual can refer to the manual to arrange the temperature for crops in different growth stages. This task is expected to take at least 2 years to complete. In the first year of this year, if half of the data can be measured and the greenhouse crops can be guaranteed to increase production, it will be considered a success. Chapter 247 Mass Production. As it turned out, Li Ju had plenty of time to plan, and the progress of the greenhouse team was much faster than he had imagined. In less than half a month, they had collected a version of the basic temperature control method. Unfortunately, this method must rely on the role of the thermometer, and the thermometer, a relatively accurate instrument, cannot be mass-produced for the time being, so it cannot be installed. But this is not important. As time goes by, experienced farmers can accurately sense whether they need to heat up or cool down by standing in the greenhouse for a while, and combined with the weather conditions and date at the time, they can determine how long the adjusted state can last. Because the literacy rate of people in other places outside Kingshan is too low, the promotion of the thermometer method and the empirical method is equally difficult, and even the empirical method is simpler for farmers who deal with water, fertilizer, light, and heat all year round. Li Ju has no experience in this area. He knows how to judge wind direction and speed and flat throw line, but he is also curious about how to measure the body temperature so accurately. Later, he learned that the best person in this area was an expert in hatching chickens and ducks, and then he suddenly realized it. The incubators can control the temperature difference of the incubation eggs within 0.5 degrees Celsius by sticking their skin on the eggs. This is really a combination of talent and experience. Most people can't learn it. This incident reminded Li Ju, so he added a few more people to the greenhouse team. They were all veterans borrowed from the chicken and duck industry. They were simply abnormal in controlling the temperature. When the greenhouse is over, these chicken and duck experts can be directly incorporated into the livestock and animal husbandry to prepare for enriching people's protein sources. After Li Ju built the greenhouse, apart from providing some technical guidance, he had no place to use his skills. so he could only continue with other previous research matters. For example, the animal husbandry development plan started at the beginning of the year can also be continued, while the experts who hatch chickens and ducks are present and can be consulted at any time. The source of meat is the conversion of grains and grasses, and the conversion efficiency is low. Unless the crops are harvested well, and the efficiency of the use of byproducts such as straw is improved, it is really difficult to start the animal husbandry industry that mainly relies on meat. Nowadays, people mostly raise livestock to obtain animal power to improve productivity, while raising poultry is mostly for making money. Even so, not many people can afford it. In this regard, Li Ju thought of a solution, which is the rice-based mulberry-based fish pond ecosystem. Through the optimization and systematization of the ancient ecological agricultural model, to achieve the goal of increasing production, fish meat is used instead of poultry and livestock to provide high-quality protein. The advantage is that there is a foundation for easy understanding, and it is relatively simple to promote. The disadvantage is that it is restricted by geographical conditions, the effect is slow, and there are certain requirements for the production methods of local people. The second method is to directly move the feed formula and feed conversion rate of high quality breeds such as white feathered chickens from modern times for centralized breeding. The advantages of this method are quick results, few limiting factors, and high output. The disadvantages are that the standardization of feed formula cannot be solved in a short period of time, and concentrated breeding requires that all conditions must be controlled very accurately. In addition, once an infectious disease of poultry and livestock under high-density breeding breaks out, it can instantly destroy the breeding industry of a village, and there is even a certain possibility of infecting people. These terrible consequences are hard to ignore. Another point is that, like seeds, the degeneration of breeding chickens cannot be ignored. Finally, it has a hidden worry, that is, this high-density breeding industry is actually based on the division of labor. If farmers cannot break away from the land, it will be difficult to obtain enough industrial workers, and eventually it can only be reduced to small workshops. If the final result is just a small workshop, why did Li Ju go to so much trouble? Sending a few chicks to each household and telling them scientific feeding methods, wouldn't it be simpler? Now even textile factories often stop production due to insufficient raw materials and labor. Textile cloth can be used as money, which is more universal than the meat, poultry and egg industry. If textile factories can't keep up, how can animal husbandry keep up? While Li Ju was looking for available talents, he was also planning the route he would take in the future. If the wrong route was chosen, 3 to 5 years might just go to waste. In the end, Li Ju talked with Zhao Xiansheng and Gan Ko, who was mainly responsible for local agriculture and animal husbandry, for half a month, and decided to choose a farm with relatively low terrain awarded by His Majesty the Emperor to conduct experiments on rice-based fish ponds. Concentrated breeding looks good, but it relies on a whole set of modern agricultural systems, and Yaoniang does not have this condition for the time being. After deciding on the route, Li Ju began to prepare the fields. The farm awarded by His Majesty the Emperor last year had been handed over to Li Ju after the autumn harvest this year. Li Ju himself did not take time to look at it carefully, but only asked Wu de Guanjia to send someone to record the basic conditions such as location, size, light, precipitation, etc. in detail, and asked him to pay attention to the final yield. Nothing else has been done yet. The farm was harvested last month, and the grain was put into the official warehouse. Now the land is resting and composting, and no second round of cultivation has been carried out. Li Ju took this opportunity to recruit temporary workers and repair the fields according to the requirements of rice-based fish ponds / vegetable-based fish ponds. In fact, the second crop of sowing this year has been late, but it is just right for testing the water storage depth and intercropping mode. In addition, Li Ju decided to take the breeding industry one step further, that is, to introduce broiler chickens that are easier to grow. Although large-scale breeding cannot be carried out for a while, variety improvement can be done first. He does not need fast-growing chickens now, but he can have broiler chickens with higher meat and egg production rates. And what if people now come up with hybrids with higher meat production rates and less prone to diseases? Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Li Ju found some Bayan chicken eggs in the warehouse and gave them to the famous hands of the chicken and duck industry to be sent to the Kang for hatching in preparation for variety improvement. At once, the greenhouse and breeding industry had a clue. At this time, there was still more than a month before the second round of crop harvest, and Li Ju once again set his sights on the textile factory. At this time, the textile factory was understaffed, but people from all over the country came to buy mule machines and learn the flying shuttle method. Rather than saying that the textile factory was a cloth factory, it was better to say that it had become a teaching base. When Li Ju walked into the textile factory again, he was stunned. Yu Yaoniang was explaining a machine, and Zhang Zhaoxi was operating it step by step under Yu Yaoniang's explanation. On the big whiteboard next to it, there were pictures with detailed explanations of the steps, and they taught one step at a time, and the thick operation manual had more than 300 pages, trying to make everyone who could learn it learn, and most of the people listening to the class were neatly dressed men and women who did not look like they were from poor families. Chapter 248 Dilemma. At first, several wealthy families who had ordered mule machines sent people to learn, and later, many wealthy families from other places secretly sent their confidants to steal the skills. They could not understand the idea of the mule machine, but the profit was hundreds of times higher. Whoever quit first would lose the opportunity to share the big pie. Therefore, even if they could not understand, they still came to apply for workers, and then started by learning to fiddle with the machine, trying to figure out how to imitate the machine. This kind of thing cannot be controlled. Anyway, the machine can only be made in Liyuan, so they can learn it. It took more than a dozen craftsmen so much time to check the parts drawings. Is it so easy to steal? Li Ju came to the textile factory to take a look. Looking at the pits and valleys full of people eager to learn, he was shaken for a moment and thought about opening the mule machine and promoting the weaving industry. But when he set his sights on the farmers outside, he calmed down. It was not the time yet, and the food was not safe enough. Many people can't even eat the chaff, which will cause the big landlords and wealthy businessmen to pursue the profits of cash crops such as cloth and cotton. What about the crops? Even if he requires the buyers of mule machines to treat the workers well, and 1 acre of cotton must be planted with 3 acres of grain, who will really follow his requirements? Of course, if the amount of grain decreases, its price will rise, and naturally some people will continue to grow grain for profit. In the end, grain, cotton, and industry will definitely form a balance, but by the time this balance is formed, it is unknown how many people will starve to death. Moreover, once the big businessmen and landlords realize the importance of land to industrial production, they will speed up the pace of land annexation at all costs. Land annexation is no longer simply related to the fate of farmers, it will even affect the stability of a central court system. There is no feudal dynasty that does not include land annexation as a factor in its demise, and there is no peasant uprising that is unrelated to land annexation. Land is the foundation of all things and relationships in the traditional Central Plains agricultural civilization. People who lose their land must be the most miserable people in agricultural civilization. Li Ju didn't want to see such a scene, but without such a group of miserable people, it would be difficult to have a thorough idea about society, and even more difficult to have a thorough evolution. In the real world, the budding of capitalism in China occurred on the basis of economic prosperity. It appeared in the Middle and Late Ming Dynasty, when the commodity economy was highly developed. Industrial workers appeared. This was a group of people without land. The bourgeois revolution in the Western world can be traced back to the sheep-eating people movement of enclosure movement and the emergence and development of the textile industry. It was accompanied by the blood and tears of the lower class people and decades of revolutionary wars. The prosperity of the commodity economy and the improvement of productivity have robbed the resources of production and survival resources. A large number of people have lost their land and entered factories, mastered advanced productivity, and accepted the most severe exploitation, so as to awaken their consciousness. It is difficult for people who are imprisoned by land, can maintain food and clothing, and indulge in the status quo to awaken themselves. It is difficult for people to fight to death, unless they are forced into a desperate situation. If the revolution cannot fight to death, it is difficult for it to completely change a world. All the contradictions of Li Ju all the time are ultimately here. He hopes to lead everyone into a new society, but the new society must be built on a thorough revolution, and a thorough revolution must be built on the basis of people's anger at the suffering and exploitation they have suffered. Li Ju brought the humane side of the modern system, allowing those who were hungry to suddenly eat meat and live a life of old age and young people being supported. How could people believe in talking about the theory of surplus value and the theory of feudal rule with such people? But could Li Ju sit idly by and watch the suffering of people? He couldn't even bear the pain he heard from others and ran to punish the landlord Wu and Shenzhen Gaiyao. How could he turn a blind eye to the suffering of those who fell into his eyes? Knowing that only by opening up modern industries could the seeds of the Industrial Revolution be sown, and this unfair system could be overthrown, Li Ju still hesitated. On one side is the unknown and distant new era, and on the other side are the living people of the present, including Sanjiu, Wu Da, Chusan, Azhu, Yabe, Yaoniang. Li Ju stood outside the textile factory for a long time until the training was over. Yaoniang notified him to leave the class, and he was welcomed to the office of the textile factory. Yaoniang's voice was very brisk, but she realized that there was something wrong with the recent recruitment situation, and explained nervously, recently, some people do not seem to rely on work to make a living, but the recruitment is different from the recruitment in the garden. I didn't ask more questions without seeing whether they are so poor that they have nowhere to go. Li Ju said, it's okay, there is no need to change anything in the future, just control this mule machine, so that others can't secretly learn to make it. At least for 3 to 5 years, it needs to be kept secret. Yaoniang felt a little strange, because Li Ju had never mentioned keeping it secret before, such as cement, pencils, moonlight skirts, honeycomb coal, etc. This was the first time that Li Ju took the initiative to talk about keeping it secret. But Yaoniang didn't ask more questions, because the personnel in the textile factory were very complicated, and it was not a place to talk. Besides, she has been preparing for her wedding recently, and she is really too busy to deal with more in-depth topics. Li Ju also knew the problem, and asked again, your wife, Wu's wedding, seems to be scheduled for the 9th day of the 12th lunar month, right? It is estimated that it will be busy for a month or so. It is the off-season for farming at that time, and the factory will be very busy. Do you have a substitute? Yaoniang said, of course, we are old. How can we forget this? My father knows the mule machine best, and Sister Zhao is good at it. Sister Zhao will take charge, my father will answer questions, and my mother will help a little. As for the dispatch of the factory, I was just about to talk to you about this. I want to ask Sister Zhao to help for a month. I wonder if it's okay. You were away a few days ago, so you may not know that Miss Yu was in charge of the clothing store during those days when Sister Zhao was away, and she was very capable. Sister Zhao has already thought about letting Miss Yu take care of half of the things, so wouldn't it be free? Asking Sister Zhao to take charge, I believe everyone is willing. Li Ju did see Sanjiu's ability, but he had other plans. When he heard Yaoniang's plan, he thought that it would only take a month or so it didn't matter if he postponed his plan. Li Ju said, okay, I'll go back and ask Madame Zhao. If she agrees, the matter will be settled. Yaoniang, I have high hopes for you, and Magistrate Wu is not a conservative person, so after marriage, I hope you can continue to run your career well. There are many women in the world who can manage the household, but there are few women who can start a career. I hope you can balance your small family in this textile factory. Yaoniang had never thought about giving up the factory, so of course she agreed without hesitation. Chapter 249. Honest people don't speak in secret. After inspecting the barren mountain, Li Ju met County Magistrate Wu when he was about to go down the mountain. County Magistrate Wu came incognito today, and he cared about Yaoniang no less than Li Ju. Even when Li Ju was busy, County Magistrate Wu came more often. The fine trees and good trees on the barren mountain were all County Magistrate Wu's political achievements, and they were the destiny of the future of Qingshan County, Huanan Road, and even the whole Dayang. They were the confidence of County Magistrate Wu to break with his own family, so he had to pay special attention to them. County Magistrate Wu took a walk around, and when he passed by the textile factory, he hesitated for a moment, but still wanted to go in to see Yu Yaoniang, and met Li Ju on the roadside outside the textile factory. What a coincidence. Old Wu just wanted to chat with Li Ju, so Li Ju gave a wink, and the two went to the pavilion in the middle of the dam on the stream. The sound of water on the dam is relatively loud, and it is easy to see at a glance whether there are people around, which is a good place to talk. The official document from Yu County was included in the court's gazette. Yu County said that it was due to local negligence, which led to the local tyrants bullying the people, and thus God's punishment. Li Ju replied, he deserves it. Magistrate Wu said, the incident happened on the 4th day of last month. What a pity, it's a little late. If it was earlier, there wouldn't be so many things. Li Ju said, it depends on God's will. The world is too big, how can God see everything? I can only hope that those who have been wronged will pray more. So this case was closed as God's punishment? Yes. Some people say that they have seen a meteor at night, as fast as an arrow. It must be an angel passing by, right? In short, it couldn't be man-made. So was in seclusion at the time, and it was seen by everyone. Naturally, it has nothing to do with you. Of course it has nothing to do with me. How can I go to this Hangshu village? The two exchanged information with each other. Magistrate Wu said that the case was closed and had nothing to do with Li Ju. Li Ju's hard work was not in vain. Li Ju also hinted to Magistrate Wu that if there was such a thing in the future, he could come to him. Both of them got a satisfactory answer, and then they parted amicably. Magistrate Wu was in a good mood after dealing with a lot of bullies through Li Ju. When he went to the textile factory, he saw Yu Yaoniang arranging several future exams in an orderly manner, and he was in an even better mood. When the other people in the factory saw that it was Yu Yaoniang's fiancé, they all left knowingly, leaving only the two young people chatting. They had so much to talk about the future, family and career. Magistrate Wu was determined to use this marriage to break off with his family, and he was very greedy. He wanted to start his own business with his mother's coffin. This was a very unfilial act at the time. Without enough confidence, he did not dare to act rashly, and his grandfather's prestige still existed. His grandfather was able to save him back then, and naturally he could also subdue him when he was disobedient. That's why he valued the chips in his hands so much. He didn't tell Yu Yaoniang about these things in detail, but only vaguely said that his family was a little complicated, and he might suffer some grievances in the future, etc. Yu Yaoniang thought of his previous engagement experience, and felt more distressed for him. Li Jiu originally wanted to take a look at the recent recruitment situation of the textile factory, but seeing the two of them whispering together, it was really a bit difficult to do it, so he turned around and went to find Sanjiu, who was working on the barren mountain, to tell her that he wanted to borrow her for a month in December. Sanjiu was mainly responsible for washing, sewing and other chores on the barren mountain. On behalf of Li Yun, she also had to teach some basic skills, such as literacy, to other women who came with his family from the barren mountain, and interested peasant women nearby. Music clothing store has always been Sanjiu's private job, and it never took up her working time. This has never changed. When Li Jiu mentioned that he wanted her to take over the personnel affairs of the factory for Yu Yaoniang for a month, Sanjiu agreed without hesitation, and went to hand over when she was free. As for whether there would be any problems with the operation of the music clothing store mentioned by Li Ju, Sanjiu was very open-minded. Yu Yaoniang is doing a good job, but she has never been very confident. It wouldn't hurt to take this opportunity to let her practice more. She was very busy before the new year. If she can handle the busyness at the end of the year, I can rest assured in the future and no longer have to worry about being unable to leave for something. Li Ju smiled and said, coincidentally, I have another thing I hope you will try, but because you have invested too much effort in the clothing store, and there is no one else to help you, I have never mentioned it. Since Yu Yaoniang has this ability, I can rest assured. Master, what you said is meaningless. If no one takes over the clothing store, will I not work for you? The affairs of the garden are the most important. I don't think there is anything that I can't let go of a clothing store. Even if I don't care, it will still work. Sanjiu didn't feel reluctant to say this. The clothing store has been running for 2 years now, and everything is on the right track. She can let go if she wants to. Anyway, there are old precedents for everything. What problems can go wrong if she does things according to them? Even if she stopped taking care of things, this small clothing store might be hard to make progress, but it would definitely be able to maintain its success. Seeing that she was not forcing him, Li Ju stopped wasting time. I want you to go to Jinling and run the Liuan weaving factory. Going out of Qingshan and going to other places had long been in Li Ju's plan. Of course, he couldn't stay in Qingshan County forever. He was just a little hesitant about whether to go north in one step or to develop in other cities first. The last trip to Jinling touched Li Ju a little. Considering the industrial development and layout, as well as the development routes of other relatives and friends, Li Ju felt that Jinling was a good place to settle down for the second time. We are doing well here. Why should we go to Jinling? Li Ju said. Just like you said, everything here has a destiny. I can spread it out, and it will still work. But the water here is a little shallow, not enough to show my skills. Even when I set up a textile factory, I have to be careful and calculate carefully, for fear of causing harm to the local people. But Jinling is different. There are 100,000 weavers in Jinling, and a certain degree of clustering has been formed. If I set up a textile factory, the impact will be smaller. Of course, this is just an idea of mine. Whether it can be successful or not, someone has to go to the field to investigate. After thinking about it, you are the most suitable. Since I want you to be in charge of the weaving factory, why not bother two people with one thing? Sanjiu nodded. I understand. I will do it. Li Ju said, let's go in the spring, when the farming season is busy, which is more suitable for observing the impact of local weaving on farming. In addition, you should bring more money with you, and buy good houses and land, when you see them, as a dowry for Xiaolian. As for Xiaolian, I originally thought that she could stay with me as a housekeeper for 2 years, but now it seems that there is no hope. She will most likely marry in Jinling, so we have to make preparations early. If you go earlier and gain a firm foothold, you can continue to visit each other after your daughter gets married in the future. Wouldn't it be better? Chapter 250. Another year is coming to an end. Xiaolian went to Jinling to stay for a few days in July. After she came back, Yufu's wife secretly sent a message saying that the old master was very satisfied and even thought it was okay to get married first and consummate the marriage later. However, Xiaolian and her mother were unwilling, so the matter was dropped. Sanjiu sneered. Really? Master also thinks that, since old master Yu likes our Xiaolian, does Xiaolian really have to marry into his family? Although Li Ju was a straight man, he also heard something wrong. If he answered wrongly at this time, he might be doomed. He hesitated for a moment, thinking of the questions Xiaolian had asked on the way back, and replied, of course I will listen to Xiaolian's own idea, or your idea. What do I know? I asked you to go to Jinling, just because I thought Xiaolian was smart and clever. If she can't make a living in a vast world, it's really not worth it. Sanjiu then turned his sneer into tenderness. That's what I mean. It depends on what the girl thinks. Okay, master, I will set off after the 15th day of the first lunar month. But you have to give me a few people. Okay, take whoever you like. Li Ju agreed to Sanjiu's request without saying anything. The two of them discussed the next things about music clothing store. Li Ju felt that he only had a small share, and there was nothing to say unless Sanjiu asked about it. Sanjiu felt that half of music clothing store was supported by Li Ju. Li Ju only participated in it on the surface, but he was actually the pillar of the clothing store. In any case, Li Ju's approval was required before making arrangements. Since the two did not fight for it and understood each other, the matter was properly agreed. During Sanjiu's visit to Jinling, music clothing store will retain Sanjiu's position, and the authority will be handed over to Yu Yaoniang, Gizi and others. If the matter in Jinling fails, Sanjiu will continue to return to run music clothing store. If Sanjiu is determined to run the weaving factory in Jinling, music clothing store will formally elect a new shopkeeper and will no longer retain Sanjiu's position, but will retain Sanjiu's dividends and 40% of the votes when electing the new shopkeeper. After making these preparations, Sanjiu was relieved to prepare for the trip to Jinling. She needed manpower, and the people she wanted to take away had to be willing to go. If they really followed her, she would have to accompany Wang Dechen to find someone who could take over the shift. Fortunately, the chicken feather room, which opened once a year, was ready. During the period when Sanjiu helped to manage the textile factory, many people would surely enter the chicken feather room and become the backup force of Li Yun. In a blink of an eye, it was time for the second round of harvesting crops, and there was another busy farming season everywhere. The newly emerging postal and textile businesses had to temporarily reduce production. Those who had land returned home to collect land. Those who had no land went out to work part-time, and there were still people who wanted them. Li Ju never competed with farming for people. When the farming season came, he usually didn't make any other arrangements and only focused on preparing for his own affairs. He inspected the manor and barren mountains granted by His Majesty the Emperor for the last time, and confirmed that there were no major problems. He returned to Li Garden and concentrated on copying books, compiling teaching materials, and printing magazines. Fu Xiaogi was in charge of the postal affairs, and he was doing a good job, but the postal business was a little cold these days, so he had some free time, just in time to copy books with Li Ju to make up for his lessons. Li Ju expected Fu Shushan to be able to preside over the affairs of one side in the future, so he needed to teach him everything he knew. Fu Shushan was also devoted to Li Ju. Some of the things Li Ju taught were in conflict with what he usually learned. Fu Shushan unconditionally changed to listen to Li Ju. Li Ju was able to earn such a family business, and he had his own way of doing things. If he didn't listen to Li Ju, would he listen to the country teachers? Those teachers bullied him a lot. Seeing that the problem that had troubled him for more than 10 years was easily solved by Li Ju, his mother, who had always been inferior and cowardly, also had more confidence between her eyebrows. The family was finally able to live in harmony and happiness. Fu Shushan almost had some feelings close to worship for Li Ju. The words of the saints that he had studied hard for those years did not solve his problems, but made him more painful. This was the root of Fu Shushan's preference for Li Yuan's doctrine. He was a thorough pragmatist and believed that practice makes true knowledge. Now Fu Shushan followed Li Ju to learn science and work, and followed Huang Zai to take the imperial examination. He was busy every day, and his parents, under the persuasion of Li Ju, took over some of the work of animal husbandry. Now Li Ju's plan for animal husbandry is still in the early stage of preparation. The first is the reconstruction of the manor fields, and the second is the hatching and cultivation of new varieties. The modern broilers, laying hens, ducks and geese with higher meat production rates selected by Li Ju have been handed over to the chicken and duck shop for hatching, and are now being carefully cared for by Fu Dad and Fu Niang according to the breeding manual given by Li Ju. Compared to the speed at which local chickens take nearly a year to grow up, the varieties given by Li Ju grow very fast. The difference from the control group chickens can be seen in half a month. In a month, they are half a circle bigger, with plump feathers, thick skin and flesh, and very heavy. Not to mention that father and mother Fu were amazed. Even the neighbors who were used to Li Yuan giving surprises from time to time were surprised again. This is not a crop, but meat. According to Li Ju's habit, such meat that grows quickly is naturally sold at cost price. They calculated the cost of raising chickens and ducks in Li Yuan, and felt that they could afford it, and eat it themselves. Even Mr. Huang's family could not guarantee to eat good meat every meal. The common people could only eat fat meat 3 or 5 times a year. They were so greedy for meat, that they dreamed of the smell of meat oil in Li Yuan's kitchen. Some people took the initiative to talk to father and mother Fu. Are you selling your chickens and ducks? If not now, then when? Can you help ask if Mr. Li is still hiring people to raise chickens and ducks? My girl is so smart, she can learn. After a while, father and mother Fu gradually became friends with the locals, and their Mandarin with a Jiahu accent gradually became a Qingshan accent. And Xiaokaoa, who was thrown over by Li Ju, finally learned to speak. Fortunately, Xiaokaoa had never been taught in the past years, and even when she spoke, she could only speak a few simple words to express her meaning. She herself didn't even know what happened to her in the past. Xiaokaoa didn't remember the hardships before, and she didn't know who brought her to Li Garden and sent her to her adoptive parents, from where, how, and how long it took. The memories she could express were all from entering Lee Garden, and Lee Ju could rest assured. The first word Xiaokao called was mother, which made Fu Niang very happy. She proposed to Fu Dai that they should simply adopt Xiaokao. Anyway, their family now relies on their own labor, and they can support 2 daughters by taking the wages given by Mr. Lee or returning to their old job as a butcher in Kingshan County. Fu Niang has been childless since she gave birth to Fu Xiaomi, and she feels sorry for Fu Dai. Fu Dai himself doesn't care. Fu Dai originally married into another family, and his ex-wife never gave birth to a child, so he never thought that he could have his own incense. One year, Fu Niang remarried him, not only bringing a scholar with the same surname and the same clan as a son, but also gave birth to a cute little girl. Fu Dai felt that he had nothing to ask for in life, and didn't expect that at this age, he could pick up a little girl for free. How could it be bad? He readily agreed, specially prepared a jar of lamb wine brewed by himself, and a big pig's head, and discussed with Lee Ju to put Xiaokao under their name. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.